I stood outside the master bedroom door of the house I had paid for, my hand trembling. It was not trembling from age or the 6-hour drive back from Oregon. It was trembling because of the thick envelope clutched in my fingers. Inside that envelope was a certified copy of my late father's will. I had expected nothing but old tools and maybe a few acres of dry dirt. Instead, I was holding the deed to 3 fully operational farms and a beachfront property in Malibu. $15 million. That was the conservative estimate. My heart was racing faster than it had in 20 years. I was about to burst into that room and tell my son Brandon and his wife Vanessa that our struggles were over. I was going to tell them that I could finally pay off their mortgage and send my grandkids to the best colleges. I raised my hand to knock, a smile forming on my face for the first time since my father died. But then I heard Vanessa's voice through the wood. It was loud, sharp, and dripping with venom. "He is back, Brandon." I saw his beat-up truck pull into the driveway. "If that old man thinks he is going to mope around here for another month, eating our food and using our electricity, he has lost his mind." I froze. My knuckles turned white against the envelope. I waited for Brandon to defend me. I waited for my son, the boy I had raised alone after his mother passed, the man whose college tuition I had paid for by working double shifts, to say something, anything. Instead, I heard a heavy sigh and the rustle of bedsheets. "Keep your voice down, Ness," Brandon said, sounding tired and weak. "He just buried his dad. Give him a couple of days." "A couple of days turns into a couple of years, Brandon," Vanessa snapped back. Her voice was getting closer to the door. "Look, we need that room. I need my home office. My real estate career is taking off, and I cannot have a 68-year-old anchor dragging me down. If he did not bring back any inheritance money from Oregon, he is going out. I already printed the brochure for Shady Pines. It is state-funded. It smells like boiled cabbage and despair, but it is free. Shady Pines. The rundown nursing home on the edge of town, where people went to die alone. The blood in my veins turned to ice. I felt a physical pain in my chest, sharper than any heart attack. This was the woman who smiled at me every morning when I made coffee. This was the woman who called me Dad when she needed me to pick up the kids from school. "You are the man of the house, Brandon," Vanessa continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was somehow louder than a scream. "You have to choose. It is either your future with me and the kids, or it is babysitting your broke, useless father. If he comes in here empty-handed, you put him in the basement or you put him in the home. Those are the options." There was a long silence. Then, I heard the words that broke something inside me that could never be fixed. "Okay, Ness, you are right. If there is no money, he has to go." I lowered my hand. The smile was gone. The excitement was gone. All that was left was a cold, hard clarity. I stepped back from the door, my footsteps silent on the carpet I had paid for, and retreated down the hall. Before I tell you how I taught them the most expensive lesson of their lives, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family who underestimated your worth. I slipped into the guest bathroom and locked the door. My reflection in the mirror looked gray and hollow. I looked like exactly what they thought I was, a tired, worn-out old man with nothing to offer. I turned on the faucet, splashing cold water on my face, trying to wash away the stinging heat of betrayal. I looked at the envelope again. $15 million. 5 minutes ago, this was a gift for my family. Now, it was a weapon. I sat on the edge of the bathtub, my hands shaking as I opened the envelope one more time just to make sure I had not hallucinated the numbers. There it was in black and white. The Napa Valley Vineyard. The solar farm in the Midwest. the land in Malibu. My father had been a quiet man, a man of secrets, much like I was about to become. He had hoarded his wealth, lived simply, and left it all to me. He had trusted me to do the right thing. I thought about Brandon. I remembered teaching him to ride a bike. I remembered the day he graduated, how proud I was. I had given him the down payment for this house. I had signed over the management of my own retirement savings to him 2 years ago when I had that minor stroke, thinking he would protect me. I was a fool. I was not a father to him anymore. I was a liability, an expense on a spreadsheet that Vanessa wanted to delete. If I walked out there right now and showed them this will, everything would change. Vanessa would weep fake tears of joy. She would hug me and call me the best father-in-law in the world. Brandon would suddenly find his spine and talk about how much he loved me. They would take the money, burn through it in 5 years, and when I was truly old and sick, they would dump me in Shady Pines anyway. Number 1. I gritted my teeth. I took the thick document and folded it. I took off my old, fraying corduroy jacket. I found a small tear in the inner lining near the shoulder. Carefully, I slid the folded will inside the lining of the jacket, pushing it deep down until it laid flat against the padding. I patted the fabric. It was invisible. To the naked eye, I was just Cliff Dalton, the retired engineer with a small pension and a smaller future. I looked at myself in the mirror one last time. The sad, grieving sun was gone. The man staring back at me was cold. He was calculating. He was a man who was about to play a very long, very dangerous game. I would give them exactly what they asked for. I would be the broke, useless old man. I would let them show me who they really were. And when the time was right, I would reveal the truth. But not before they paid for every cruel word I had just heard. I unlocked the bathroom door and walked out. I hunched my shoulders slightly, adding 10 years to my posture. I dragged my feet. I made my way to the living room, where the smell of expensive candles could not hide the stench of moral rot. Brandon and Vanessa were sitting on the couch. They jumped slightly when I entered. They had not heard me come in from the bathroom. Vanessa was the first to recover. She plastered a bright plastic smile on her face. "Dad, you are back." We did not hear the truck. "How was the funeral?" "It was simple," I said, my voice raspy. I sat down on the armchair opposite them. It was the chair I had bought for my late wife, the only piece of furniture in this room that Vanessa had not replaced with something beige and uncomfortable. "I am so sorry, Cliff," Vanessa said, her eyes scanning my empty hands, looking for a checkbook, a document, anything. "Did your father... Was everything in order?" Brandon looked down at his feet, unable to meet my eyes. He knew what she was asking. I let the silence stretch. I watched them. I saw the greed in Vanessa's eyes, sharp and hungry. I saw the guilt in Brandon's posture, heavy but not heavy enough to make him speak up. "Dad was in a lot of debt," I lied. The words tasted like ash, but they came out smooth. The farms were mortgaged to the hilt. The banks took everything. There was nothing left. Not a dime. In fact, I had to use the last of my savings just to pay for the burial. The effect was instantaneous. It was like watching a light bulb shatter. Vanessa's smile vanished so fast, it was almost comical. Her face hardened into a mask of pure disgust. She sat back, crossing her arms, no longer trying to hide her contempt. "Nothing?" she repeated, her voice rising an octave. "Are you serious? We thought he owned land. We thought he had savings." "He did, once," I said, keeping my gaze steady. "But medical bills, bad harvests, it is all gone. I am sorry. I came back with nothing but the clothes on my back." Brandon finally looked up. His face was pale. "Dad," Are you sure? Did you check with the lawyers? Maybe there is a hidden account? I shook my head. There is nothing, son. I am tapped out. I was hoping... I paused, letting a tremor enter my voice. I was hoping I could stay here for a while. Just until I get my pension sorted out. I would not be a burden. Vanessa laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. Not a burden. Cliff, look around you. We have bills. We have a lifestyle to maintain. We were counting on... Well, never mind what we were counting on. The point is, this is not a charity hotel. Ness, please, Brandon whispered, but there was no force behind it. Don't you Ness me, Brandon. She stood up, pacing the room. Her expensive heels clicked aggressively on the hardwood floor. This changes everything. We cannot afford to feed another mouth, especially not one that contributes nothing. She turned to me, her eyes cold and dead. Fine. You can stay. But things are going to change around here. We are turning the guest room into my office starting tomorrow. I have clients coming and I need the space. Where will I sleep? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Vanessa pointed a manicured finger toward the kitchen door, toward the dark, narrow staircase that led down. The basement. There is an old cot down there. It is dry enough. If you want a roof over your head, that is where you will be. And do not expect us to wait on you hand and foot. If you are living here, you earn your keep. I looked at Brandon. I gave him one last chance. One last opportunity to be the man I raised. Son? I asked softly. Is this what you want? To put your father in the cellar? Brandon looked at his wife, then at me. He saw the fire in Vanessa's eyes and he withered. He was a coward. A weak, spineless coward. It is just for a while, Dad, he mumbled, rubbing the back of his neck. Just until you get back on your feet. The basement is not so bad. It has privacy. Privacy. That was a nice word for isolation. I nodded slowly. I stood up, gripping the lapels of my jacket, feeling the crinkle of the $15 million will hidden beneath my fingers. Okay, I said. The basement it is. I picked up my small duffel bag and walked toward the kitchen. As I opened the door to the cellar, a draft of cold, musty air hit my face. It smelled of mold and neglect. I will go down now, I said, not looking back. I closed the door behind me, shutting out the light of the main house. As I descended into the darkness, I did not feel fear. I felt a strange, cold satisfaction. They thought they were burying me down here. They thought they were discarding a piece of trash. They had no idea that they had just planted a seed that would destroy their entire world. The game had officially begun. The migration from the guest bedroom to the basement was not just a change of location. It was a demotion in human status. I spent the next hour packing my life into 2 cardboard boxes. It is funny how little you actually need when you realize that nobody wants you around. I folded my shirts, the ones with the frayed collars that Vanessa always sneered at. I packed the photo of my late wife, Sarah. I wrapped it carefully in a sweater because I knew if the glass broke, I would not have the money to replace the frame. Vanessa stood in the doorway the entire time, leaning against the frame with her arms crossed, tapping her foot. She was not there to help. She was there to supervise, like a prison guard making sure the inmate does not steal the bedsheets. Make sure you take everything, Cliff, she said, checking her watch. The contractors are coming in an hour to rip up that carpet. I want this room stripped bare. I looked around the room. I had painted these walls myself 5 years ago. I had installed the crown molding. Now, I was being evicted from my own labor. I thought you said you needed an office, I said, picking up the last box. I do, she replied, her eyes flicking to the corner where she had already leaned a rolled-up yoga mat and a set of expensive weights. A multi-purpose space for my mental health. I need a sanctuary. A sanctuary. She was kicking an old man into a cellar so she could have a place to do downward dog in peace. The irony was so thick it choked me, but I swallowed it down. I picked up the boxes. They were heavy, or maybe I was just tired. My joints ached from the drive, but I refused to show weakness. I walked past her, smelling her expensive perfume, a scent bought with money I had given them for groceries last Christmas. I made my way to the kitchen. Brandon was there, drinking a protein shake, staring at his phone. He did not look up as I shuffled past him with my life in my arms. He did not offer to open the door. He did not offer to carry a box. He just swiped his thumb across the screen, erasing me from his peripheral vision. The door to the basement was a gaping black mouth. I flipped the switch, and a single naked bulb flickered to life at the bottom of the stairs, casting long skeletal shadows against the concrete walls. The air that drifted up was stale and cold. It smelled of wet earth and ancient dust. I took the first step down. The wood creaked under my weight, a groan of protest that echoed in the silence of the house. Step by step, I descended. With each footfall, the temperature dropped. By the time I reached the concrete floor, I could see my breath misting in the air. The basement was an unfinished cavern. It was where we stored the things we did not want to look at. Broken holiday decorations, old gym equipment, and now me. Vanessa followed me down, her heels clicking sharply on the wooden stairs. She stopped 3 steps from the bottom, as if touching the concrete would contaminate her. "There is the cot," she said, pointing to a metal frame in the corner, pushed up against the cinder block wall. "We put an old mattress on it. It is perfectly fine." I looked at the mattress. It was stained and lumpy, a relic from Brandon's college days. There were no sheets, just the bare, striped ticking. "And over there is the utility sink if you need water," she continued, gesturing to a basin stained with paint and rust. "And the toilet is behind that partition. It runs a little, so jiggle the handle. We do not want to pay for a plumber." I set my boxes down on the freezing floor. The cold seeped through the soles of my shoes instantly. "Is there a heater?" I asked, wrapping my arms around myself. "It is 50 degrees down here, Vanessa." She rolled her eyes, a gesture she had perfected over the years. "It is a basement, Cliff. It is supposed to be cool. Besides, heat rises. You will be fine. Just put on a sweater. We are trying to cut down on the utility bills. This big house costs a fortune to heat. Not that you would understand the economics of running a modern household." She turned to go back up, but paused, her hand on the railing. "Oh, and one more thing. We lock the door at the top of the stairs at 10 o'clock, for security. So if you need anything from the kitchen, get it before then. I do not want you wandering around the house at night setting off the alarm or waking us up." "You are locking me in?" I asked, my voice low. "Like a dog?" She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "Do not be dramatic. It is for everyone's safety. Good night, Cliff." She walked up the stairs, her silhouette disappearing into the light of the kitchen. Then the door slammed shut. I heard the distinct click of the deadbolt sliding into place. I was alone. I stood there for a long time, listening to the silence. Then the furnace kicked on with a roar like a jet engine. It was located right next to the cot. The noise was deafening, vibrating through the floor, but it provided no warmth, only noise and the smell of burning dust. I walked over to the cot and sat down. The springs shrieked. I reached into my box and pulled out the old wool blanket I had brought from Oregon. It was scratchy and smelled of my father's house, of wood smoke and pine. I wrapped it around my shoulders, shivering. Above me, I heard footsteps, the muffled thud of life going on without me. I heard the television turn on. I heard Vanessa laughing at something. I heard the water running in the master bathroom, the pipes singing in the ceiling above my head. They were taking a hot bath. They were adjusting the thermostat to a comfortable 72 degrees. They were drinking wine and eating the roast beef I had seen defrosting on the counter. I looked around my new prison, a spider web draped across the corner of the ceiling, trembling in the draft. A small pile of mouse droppings sat near the drain in the floor. This was it. This was the sum total of my life's work in their eyes. I lay down on the cot, pulling the blanket up to my chin. The cold was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest. I could feel the dampness settling into my bones, awakening the arthritis in my knees. I stared at the exposed beams of the ceiling. I knew exactly how those beams were placed. I knew the load-bearing capacity of every joist. I had inspected this house myself before I bought it for them. I had made sure it was safe. I had made sure it was warm, and now I was freezing in its guts. But as the shivering took hold, my hand drifted to the pocket of my jacket, which I had folded into a pillow. I felt the crinkle of the paper inside the lining. "Let them have their heat," I whispered to the darkness. "Let them have their yoga room and their hot baths." Every shiver that racked my body was a deposit in a bank account of rage that was compounding interest by the second. I closed my eyes, but I did not sleep. I listened to the house. I listened to their footsteps. I memorized the rhythm of their comfort. The next morning, I woke up with a stiff neck and a throat that felt like it was filled with broken glass. The basement was even colder in the morning light that filtered through the single small window well, which was choked with dead leaves and trash. I coughed, a deep, hacking sound that echoed off the concrete. I sat up, my head spinning. I needed hot coffee. I needed to get warm. I climbed the stairs, my legs heavy. I tried the door handle. Locked. I checked my watch. It was 7:30. Vanessa had said they locked it at 10. She had not unlocked it yet. I knocked. "Hello?" I called out, my voice weak. "Brandon." "Vanessa?" Silence. I knocked harder. "Open the door. Please. It is freezing down here." I heard footsteps approaching. The lock clicked. The door swung open, revealing Vanessa dressed in expensive workout gear, a towel draped around her neck. She looked annoyed. "God, Cliff, what is the racket? You woke up the whole house." "It is 7:30, I rasped. "You said—" "I said we lock it for security," she cut me off. "I did not say I would be standing here as your personal doorman at the crack of dawn. We have a schedule." "Brandon is in the shower. I'm about to start my workout." She looked me up and down, wrinkling her nose. "And you smell like a basement. Do not come into the kitchen until you have cleaned yourself up. It is unsanitary." "I do not have a shower down there," I reminded her, fighting the urge to cough again. "Use the utility sink. Use a washcloth. Figure it out. Just do not bring that mildew smell into my breakfast nook." She started to close the door again, but I jammed my foot in the gap. It was an instinct, a flash of the man I used to be. "I need coffee, Vanessa, and I need my blood pressure medication. It is in the kitchen cabinet." She looked at my foot, then at my face. For a second, she looked surprised. Then she sneered. "Fine. Grab your pills, but take them downstairs. I have a Zoom session with a client in 20 minutes, and I cannot have you hacking up a lung in the background. It ruins the aesthetic." She stepped back, allowing me into the kitchen. The warmth hit me like a physical blow. It was paradise. The smell of brewing coffee was intoxicating. I walked to the cabinet, my hands shaking as I reached for my pill bottle. I saw the coffee pot. It was full. I reached for a mug. Vanessa said, wagging a finger. That is French roast. Imported. Brandon bought me a special blend. There is instant coffee in the pantry. Use that. And boil your own water. I am not wasting the filtered water on instant. I stood there, holding the empty mug. I looked at the pot of steaming, rich coffee. I looked at the woman who was denying me a cup of hot liquid while I stood shivering in my own house. I put the mug down. I went to the pantry. I found a jar of generic instant coffee that had expired 3 years ago. I took it. I took a chipped mug from the back of the cupboard. I filled it with tap water and put it in the microwave. While the microwave hummed, I watched Vanessa arrange her yoga mat in the living room. She pushed aside the coffee table. She adjusted the lighting. She checked her reflection in the mirror, smoothing her hair. She looked happy. She looked content. She looked like a woman who had successfully exterminated a pest. The microwave beeped. I took my hot water, stirred in the stale powder, and swallowed my pills. The coffee tasted like burnt dirt, but the heat spread through my chest, loosening the tightness just a little. I walked back toward the basement door. Don't forget to close it all the way, Vanessa called out without looking at me. I don't want the draft coming up. I paused at the top of the stairs. I looked at her back. Enjoy your workout, Vanessa, I said. She didn't answer. She was already putting on her headphones, tuning out the world, tuning out me. I went back down into the dark. I sat on the cot and drank my terrible coffee. I looked at the walls. They were gray and unforgiving. But as my eyes adjusted to the gloom, I noticed something. In the corner behind the water heater, there was a loose brick. I walked over to it. I pulled it out. There was a small hollow space behind it. A perfect hiding place. I took off my jacket. I ripped the lining. I took out the will. I folded it smaller and smaller until it was a tight, dense square. I shoved it into the hole and replaced the brick. It was safe now. Safer than it was on my body. I sat back down. The cold was still there, but now I had a secret fire burning. I would endure the basement. I would endure the cold. I would endure the instant coffee and the locked doors. Because every hour I spent in this dungeon was another zero added to the bill I was going to hand them. Later that night, I lay awake listening to the furnace roar. I was hungry. They hadn't called me for dinner. I had eaten a stale granola bar I found in my coat pocket. My phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. Mr. Dalton, this is Patty Moore. I received your message. I am reviewing the trust documents now. We need to meet. It has to be discreet. I smiled in the dark. The signal had been received. The cavalry wasn't coming to save me. I was the cavalry, and I was already inside the fortress. I pulled the scratchy wool blanket up to my chin, and for the first time in days, I fell into a deep, dreamless sleep, lulled by the rhythmic, mechanical thrum of the machine that kept their house warm, while I plotted to leave them out in the cold. 3 days into my exile, the monster in the corner died. The furnace, which had been my noisy, rattling companion, suddenly fell silent. At first I thought it was just cycling off. I pulled my wool blanket tighter around my shoulders and waited for the familiar clunk whoosh of the ignition sequence. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The silence stretched out, heavy and ominous. Up until that moment, the basement had been uncomfortable, yes. It was damp and smelled of earth, but at least the ambient heat from the furnace unit itself kept the temperature bearable. It was probably around 60 degrees, chilly, but survivable. But as the hour mark passed, I felt the change in the air pressure. The stillness wasn't peaceful. It was predatory. The cold didn't just enter the room. It seemed to rise up from the concrete floor like a rising tide. I got up from the cot, my joints popping in protest. I walked over to the large metal box of the HVAC unit. I placed my hand on the side panel. It was cooling rapidly. I checked the pilot light window. Dark. Maybe the pilot light just went out, I told myself. A mechanical failure. It happens. I grabbed a flashlight from my toolbox, one of the few things I had managed to bring down here, and inspected the gas line. The valve was in the open position. That wasn't it. I traced the wires. Everything looked intact. Then I looked up at the ductwork. The basement had its own zone damper, a motorized flap that controlled airflow to the lower level. I climbed up on an overturned milk crate to get a better look. The lever on the damper had been manually zip-tied in the closed position. I stared at that white plastic zip tie. It was new. The plastic was clean, stark white against the dusty galvanized steel. This wasn't a malfunction. This was a modification. I climbed down, my breath already starting to mist in the beam of the flashlight. I walked to the stairs and climbed them, my anger providing a temporary source of heat. I pounded on the door. "Vanessa!" I shouted. I heard the muffled sounds of the TV in the living room. Footsteps approached, light and annoyed. The door opened a crack. Vanessa stood there, holding a glass of red wine. She looked flushed and warm. Heat, lovely, expensive heat, poured out from the kitchen around her, smelling of roasting garlic and rosemary. "What now, Cliff? We are trying to watch a movie." "The furnace is off," I said, trying to keep my teeth from chattering. "And the vent damper is tied shut. It is freezing down there." Vanessa took a sip of her wine, her eyes unblinking over the rim of the glass. "Oh, that. Yes. I had the HVAC guy come out while you were napping this afternoon. He did a system audit. Apparently, heating the basement is incredibly inefficient. It is just concrete down there, Cliff. It sucks the heat right out of the house. We were losing 30% of our energy down that hole." "You cut the heat?" I asked, incredulous. "You cut the heat to the room I am sleeping in? It is January in Chicago, Vanessa." "Don't be dramatic," she sighed, leaning against the doorframe. "It is a finished basement. It will stay above freezing. The ambient temperature from the ground keeps it stable. Besides, you have that wool blanket. And sweaters. Layer up. It is what the experts recommend for energy efficiency." "Experts?" I stepped closer, blocking her from closing the door. "You are talking about a human being, not a wine cellar. I am 68 years old. I cannot sleep in 40-degree weather." "Then maybe you should have thought about that before you came back here empty-handed," she hissed, her voice dropping to that dangerous whisper. "Look, gas prices are through the roof. Brandon and I are making sacrifices to keep this household running. We turned the thermostat down to 68 upstairs. We are all suffering a little. You can handle a little chill." "Suffering? You are wearing a silk blouse and drinking a $20 bottle of Cabernet." "It is Merlot," she corrected. "And get your foot out of the door. You are letting the draft in." She kicked my foot, actually kicked it with her pointed slipper, and slammed the door. I heard the lock turn. I stood there on the top step, staring at the wood grain. I could hear the faint murmur of the TV again. They were warm. They were comfortable. And they had just condemned me to freeze. That night was the longest of my life. The temperature in the basement dropped steadily. I put on every piece of clothing I had. 2 shirts, a sweater, my corduroy jacket. I wore 2 pairs of socks. I pulled the scratchy wool blanket over my head, creating a small tent to trap my own breath. But the cold was relentless. It seeped through the layers. It settled in my toes and fingers, a dull, throbbing ache. By morning, I couldn't feel my feet. When I tried to stand, my knees locked up. I had to massage my legs for 10 minutes just to get the blood flowing enough to walk to the bathroom. The water in the toilet bowl had a thin film of ice on the edges. I didn't go upstairs that day. I refused to beg. I refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing me shiver. I spent the day pacing the small perimeter of the basement, swinging my arms, doing squats, anything to generate body heat. I was an engineer. I knew about thermodynamics. I knew that if I stopped moving, the cold would win. But biology is a cruel mistress. By the third day, my body began to fail. It started with a tickle in the back of my throat, dry and irritating. Then came the congestion. My chest felt heavy, like someone had poured concrete into my lungs. The coughing started. Dry, hacking coughs that racked my entire frame and left me gasping for air in the frigid darkness. I tried to hide it. I buried my face in the pillow when the coughing fits hit, trying to muffle the sound. I didn't want them to know, but sound travels through floorboards. On the fourth night, I was burning up. Fever. It was a cruel paradox. My body was on fire, sweating and shivering simultaneously, while the air around me was cold enough to see. I lay on the cot, drifting in and out of a delirium. I dreamed of the vineyards in Napa. I dreamed of the warm California sun on my face. I dreamed of burning the will, of burning the money, just to feel the heat of the flames. I woke up to a sound. Not the furnace. A creak on the stairs. I lay still, my eyes adjusting to the gloom. A beam of light cut through the darkness. It was a flashlight, but the beam was shaking. "Dad?" It was Brandon. His voice was a whisper, thick with fear. I tried to answer, but it came out as a wet, rattling cough. I sat up, clutching the blanket to my chest. "Brandon?" I croaked. He hurried down the last few steps, the flashlight beam dancing wildly over the concrete floor. He was wearing his thick bathrobe and slippers. He looked around nervously, as if he expected Vanessa to jump out from behind the water heater. He came to the side of the cot. He shined the light on my face, and I saw him wince. I must have looked terrible. Pale, sweating, with dark circles under my eyes. "Jesus, Dad," he whispered. "You sound awful." "I am fine," I managed to say, though my teeth were chattering so hard I bit my tongue. "Just a little cold." "It is freezing down here," he said, his breath pluming in the light. "This is crazy. I told her it was too much." He set the flashlight on the floor, pointing it up at the ceiling so it cast a diffuse glow. He reached into the deep pockets of his robe. "Here," he said, pulling out a bottle of red liquid. "It is NyQuil, the good stuff, and I brought these." He pulled out a package of hand warmers, the kind you put in your gloves when you go skiing, and a foil-wrapped bundle that smelled faintly of chicken. "Leftovers from dinner," he muttered. She threw it in the trash, but it was still in the container. I fished it out. "It is chicken parmesan." I looked at my son. He was 35 years old, a grown man, and he was smuggling garbage to his father in the middle of the night like a criminal. My heart broke for him, and then it hardened against him. He was trying, yes, but he was bringing me trash and cough syrup instead of standing up to his wife and turning on the heat. "Thank you," I said, taking the bottle. I unscrewed the cap and took a long swig. The medicine burned going down, a chemically sweet fire that I welcomed. Brandon cracked the hand warmers and tucked them under my blanket, near my feet. "I am sorry, Dad," he said, his voice trembling. She is under a lot of pressure. The market is tough right now. She is stressed. She does not mean to be cruel." "She tied the damper shut, Brandon," I said softly. "That takes planning. That is not stress. That is malice." He looked away, unable to face the truth. "I will try to talk to her again tomorrow," he promised. A promise we both knew was empty. "Just Try to get some sleep. The medicine will knock you out." He stood up to leave. He looked pathetic in his plush robe, a man king in his own home but a servant in his marriage. Suddenly, the light at the top of the stairs flipped on. The basement was flooded with harsh, yellow illumination. Brandon froze like a deer in headlights. I squeezed my eyes shut against the glare. Vanessa stood at the top of the stairs. She wasn't wearing a robe. She was wearing her pristine white silk pajamas, her arms crossed, her face a mask of cold fury. "Brandon?" she called out. Her voice wasn't loud. It was terrifyingly calm. "What are you doing?" Brandon spun around, his hands coming up in a guilt-ridden gesture. "Ness. I heard him coughing. I just came down to check on him." She descended the stairs slowly. 1 step, 2 steps. She moved like a predator stalking wounded prey. She reached the bottom and looked at the scene. The flashlight on the floor, the hand warmers, the bottle of NyQuil in my hand, the foil-wrapped chicken. She walked over to me and snatched the bottle of medicine from my grip. She held it up to the light. "Brand name," she tutted. $12 a bottle. And you are letting him chug it like it is water." "He is sick, Ness," Brandon pleaded. "Listen to his chest. He has a fever. If he gets pneumonia, it is because his immune system is weak," she cut in. "And do you know why we have this medicine, Brandon? For us. For when you have to work and cannot afford a sick day. For when I have a showing and need to be on my game. Not for a retired man who has nothing to do but sit in the dark and feel sorry for himself." She looked at the hand warmers under the blanket. She reached in and ripped them out. "And these? These are $5 a pack. Do you think money grows on trees? Do you think I am out there hustling real estate deals so you can throw our profits into a black hole?" She threw the hand warmers onto the dirty floor. "It is $5, Vanessa." Brandon's voice cracked. "He is my dad. He is a leech," she screamed, her composure finally breaking. She pointed a finger at me, her face twisted and ugly. "Look at him. He is playing you, Brandon. The coughing, the shivering. It is an act. He wants you to feel guilty so you will bring him upstairs. He wants to manipulate us." "Well, I am not falling for it." She turned back to Brandon, poking him in the chest with a manicured nail. "You are weak. That is your problem. You have always been a mama's boy. And now you are a daddy's boy." "I need a man, Brandon. I need a partner who understands that we are building an empire, and empires don't have room for dead weight." She snatched the foil-wrapped chicken from the cot. "And he is eating our food? I told you to throw this out." "I fished it out of the trash," Brandon said, his head hanging low. "Disgusting," she sneered. She looked at me with pure revulsion. "You are eating garbage now, Cliff? Have you no dignity left?" I looked up at her. My eyes were burning with fever, but my mind was crystal clear. "I have plenty of dignity, Vanessa," I whispered, my voice raspy but steady. "Enough to know that I would rather freeze to death down here than be warm upstairs with a soul as black as yours." She laughed. A cold, sharp sound. "Keep your poetry. It won't keep you warm." She grabbed Brandon by the sleeve of his robe. "Upstairs. Now. If I catch you sneaking down here again, Brandon, I swear to God, I will change the locks on the main door and you can sleep down here with him. Do not test me." Brandon looked at me one last time. His eyes were wet. "I am sorry, Dad," he mouthed. Then he let her drag him away. Vanessa paused at the bottom of the stairs. She looked at the bottle of NyQuil in her hand, then at me. She unscrewed the cap and poured the red liquid onto the concrete floor. It splashed and spread like a pool of blood. "Oops," she said, her face completely blank. "Clumsy me." She turned and walked up the stairs. Brandon followed. The door slammed. The lock clicked. The light went out. I was back in the darkness. The smell of menthol and medicine filled the air, rising from the puddle on the floor. I watched the liquid seep into the cracks of the concrete. I shivered, but this time, it wasn't just from the cold. It was from the adrenaline. She had poured out the medicine. She had taken the heat. She had stripped me of my son's loyalty. She thought she had won. She thought she had broken me. I reached under the cot and pulled out the brick I had loosened. I ran my fingers over the folded edges of the will. $15 million. Every cough that tore through my chest that night was a reminder of the price she was going to pay. She worried about wasting $5 on hand warmers. I was going to make sure she lost every single penny she ever dreamed of having. I rolled onto my side, pulling the thin blanket up. I visualized the solar farm in the Midwest. I visualized the panels soaking up the sun, generating power, generating heat. I visualized the vineyard in Napa, the grapes ripening on the vine. I held on to those images like burning coals. I will survive this, I whispered to the empty room. And when I come upstairs, Vanessa, I am going to burn your empire to the ground. The fever dreams took me then, but even in my sleep, I was counting the days, counting the insults, counting the money. The cold could not kill me. I was too fueled by hate to die. Over the next 2 weeks, I perfected the art of disappearing. Invisibility is not a superpower, as the comic books would have you believe. It is a slow, humiliating erasure of the self. I learned the rhythm of the house better than the people who owned the deed. I knew that Vanessa left for her Pilates class at 8:15 sharp. I knew Brandon sat in his car in the driveway for 10 minutes every evening before coming inside, likely building up the courage to face his wife's demands. I lived in the negative spaces of their schedule. My day began when they left. I would creep up the stairs, my joints popping in the silence, to forage for food. I did not dare touch the pristine groceries in the refrigerator. Vanessa counted the eggs. She marked the level of the milk with a Sharpie. Instead, I became a scavenger in my own kitchen. I dug through the trash can. I found half a bagel with a bite taken out of it. I found apple cores that still had fruit on them. I found the heel of a loaf of bread that was slightly stale. I ate these things standing over the sink, washing them down with tap water, my eyes darting to the window in case they returned early. It was degrading, yes, but every stale crumb I swallowed fueled a fire in my belly that had nothing to do with hunger. Hygiene was another battle. Since I was banned from the upstairs bathroom, the utility sink in the basement became my entire world. It was a deep concrete basin stained with decades of paint and grease. It was where I washed my face, my body, and my clothes. One Tuesday, I was scrubbing my underwear in the freezing water. My hands, knobby with arthritis and age, were red and raw. The cheap bar of soap I had found behind the dryer would not lather. I was shivering, the cold from the concrete floor seeping through my socks. Suddenly, the door at the top of the stairs flew open. I hadn't heard the garage door opener. Vanessa was home early. "Cliff," she shouted down, "what is that smell? Are you cooking down there?" "No," I called back, my voice echoing off the damp walls. "Just washing my clothes, Vanessa." "Well, stop it!" The sound of the pipes is vibrating through the floor. I am trying to record a virtual tour for a listing. And do not hang your wet rags down there. The humidity will warp the floorboards above. Take them outside. "It is snowing, Vanessa," I said, looking at my dripping wet shirt. "They will freeze solid." "Not my problem," she replied. "Just make the noise stop." She slammed the door. I stood there, water dripping from my hands onto my shoes. I squeezed the water out of my shirt as best I could. I did not take it outside. I hung it on a rusty nail behind the furnace, praying she wouldn't come down to check. I spent the next 4 hours sitting in the dark, shivering in my damp undershirt, waiting for my outer clothes to dry. But while my days were filled with the misery of a prisoner, my nights were the domain of the warden. When the clock struck midnight, and the heavy silence of sleep settled over the house, I came alive. I would crawl under my scratchy wool blanket, pull the old flip phone from its hiding place inside a hollow leg of the metal cot, and dial. The first ring was always answered immediately. Patty Moore did not sleep much either. "Report," she said. Her voice was crisp, professional, and comforting. It was the voice of a shark in a tailored suit. I kept my voice to a whisper, barely a breath. "They are moving forward with the sale of the house. I heard Vanessa on the phone today. She is pushing for a quick closing. She wants cash." "Good," Patty said. "That plays right into our hands. I have the LLC set up. We are calling it Osiris Ventures. It sounds corporate and vague enough to be boring. No one will look twice at it." "Do they know who's behind it?" I asked. "No. I have used a registered agent in Delaware. Your name appears nowhere on the public record. As far as they know, Osiris Ventures is just an investment group looking for assets in the area." "Excellent. And the price?" Patty chuckled, a low, dry sound. "We are going to offer 20% over asking price. All cash. No inspection. A 7-day close." My breath hitched. That was aggressive. That was the kind of offer that made greedy people lose their minds. 20%? I whispered. That is almost $200,000 over market value, Patty." "Exactly," she replied. "We need them to be blinded by the money. We need them to be so excited about the windfall that they do not read the fine print. We need them to sign the contract without asking a single question." I shifted on the cot, the springs groaning softly. I thought about Vanessa's face when she saw that number. She would see purses. She would see vacations. She would see the validation she craved. "The contract is ready," Patty continued. "It includes the liquidated damages clause we discussed. Clause 4B. If they fail to vacate or if they misappropriate the deposit funds prior to the final transfer of deed, the penalty is triple the deposit amount, and the buyer retains a lien on all their other assets." "Will they read it?" I asked. "Gavin Ross is their lawyer," Patty said with disdain. "He is a strip mall attorney who chases ambulances. He will see the purchase price and his commission, and he will tell them to sign immediately. He is lazy, Cliff. Just like them." I closed my eyes, visualizing the trap snapping shut. "What about the other assets?" I asked. "The vineyard is secure. The management team knows to report only to me. The solar farm lease is finalized. Cliff, you are currently sitting on a liquid net worth that generates $40,000 a month in passive income. And you are sleeping in a basement." I looked around my dark, cold prison. I looked at the mouse droppings in the corner. "I need to do this, Patty. I need to know. I need to know if there is any part of my son left in there, any part that isn't corrupted by her." "And?" Patty asked gently. "What have you found?" I was silent for a long moment. I thought about the NyQuil on the floor. I thought about the silence when I asked for help. I think the son I raised died a long time ago," I whispered. "Then proceed with the operation," she said. "I will have the offer letter sent to their realtor tomorrow morning. Get ready, Cliff. The atmosphere in that house is about to change. They are going to be celebrating. It will be hard to watch." "Let them celebrate," I said, my voice hardening. "Let them drink their champagne. It will taste bitter soon enough." We hung up. I hid the phone back in the metal leg of the cot. I lay there in the dark, but I didn't feel the cold anymore. I felt powerful. The next morning, the change was palpable. I was woken up not by Vanessa screaming, but by the sound of laughter. I heard footsteps running across the floorboards above my head. Heavy, excited footsteps. I waited until I heard the coffee grinder, the good one, whirring in the kitchen. I trudged up the stairs, rubbing my tired eyes. When I opened the door, the kitchen was flooded with light. Vanessa was wearing a silk robe I had never seen before. She was humming. She was actually humming. Brandon was sitting at the island, staring at his tablet with a look of pure shock on his face. "Oh, look who is up," Vanessa said. She didn't scowl. She actually smiled. It was a terrifying, predatory smile. "There is coffee in the pot, Cliff. You can have a cup." I paused, wary. This was a trap. "Real coffee?" I asked. She waved her hand dismissively. "Go ahead. We are in a good mood today." I walked over to the counter. Brandon looked up at me. His eyes were wide, manic. "Dad, you won't believe it," he stammered. "We just got an offer on the house." "Already?" I feigned ignorance, pouring a cup of the rich, dark roast. I didn't put sugar in it. I wanted to taste the bitterness. "Not just an offer," Vanessa interrupted, walking over to hug Brandon's shoulders. "An insane offer. All cash. Over asking. No inspection. They want to close in a week." "That sounds too good to be true," I said carefully, blowing on the steam. "Don't be a wet blanket," Vanessa snapped, though she lacked her usual venom. "It is a corporate buyer. Osiris Ventures. They are buying up the whole neighborhood probably. They have deep pockets." "We are going to be rich, Ness," Brandon whispered, scrolling through the numbers. "After we pay off the mortgage and the agent fees, we are walking away with almost $500,000 in cash." Vanessa squeezed him tight. "We can get the Porsche," she whispered in his ear, loud enough for me to hear. "We can put the down payment on the lakefront property in Lake Geneva. We can finally live, Brandon." I took a sip of coffee. It was delicious. It tasted like victory. "So," I said, leaning against the counter, "if you sell the house in a week, where are we going to live?" Vanessa turned to me. The smile didn't leave her face, but her eyes went cold again. "We are going to a hotel until the new place is ready. 5 stars, room service, the works." "And me?" I asked. She sighed as if I were a minor inconvenience, like a fly at a picnic. "Well, obviously you cannot come to the hotel. It is not set up for extended family. But don't worry. With this money we can afford to put you in a motel for a few weeks until a room at Shady Pines opens up. A nice motel. One with cable. A motel. And then the nursing home." Even in their greatest moment of triumph, their first instinct was to discard me. "That is generous of you," I said. "It is, isn't it?" Vanessa beamed. "We are generous people, Cliff. We just needed a break. And this is our break." She grabbed Brandon's face and kissed him. "Sign it, babe. Call Gavin and tell him to accept immediately. Do not let them change their minds." I watched my son. I watched him tap the screen, signing away his home, signing away his future, signing his own death warrant. "Done," he said, exhaling. We sold the house. Vanessa let out a squeal of delight. She went to the fridge and pulled out a bottle of champagne. It was 10 in the morning. "Get 3 glasses," she ordered Brandon. He hesitated. "3? "Yes, 3. Give one to your dad. We are celebrating." Brandon fetched a 3rd glass. He poured the bubbling liquid. He handed it to me. "Cheers, Dad," he said. "To new beginnings." I raised the glass. I looked at the golden bubbles rising to the surface, destined to burst. To new beginnings, I echoed. I drank. The champagne was cold and sweet. I watched them dance around the kitchen, drunk on greed. I went back downstairs to my basement, closing the door on their celebration. I sat on my cot and waited for nightfall. I had to call Patty. The mouse had taken the cheese. Now it was time to snap the trap. The week leading up to Christmas was not filled with carols or cookies. It was filled with the frantic, terrifying energy of Vanessa, trying to curate the perfect life for an audience of strangers. She was hosting her firm's annual holiday mixer. It was her chance to impress the senior partners, to show off the house she claimed was hers, and to secure her promotion. For 3 days, cleaners swept through the upper floors like a swarm of locusts, polishing surfaces until they gleamed. I heard the vacuum cleaners thumping above my head while I lay in the dark, conserving the battery on my flashlight. 2 hours before the guests were set to arrive, the basement door opened. Vanessa threw a bundle of fabric down the stairs. It landed with a soft thud on the concrete floor. "Put this on," she commanded, "and make sure you shave. You look like a derelict." I walked over and picked up the bundle. It was a white button-down shirt and a black vest, a waiter's uniform. It smelled faintly of mothballs. "You want me to serve?" I asked, looking up at her silhouette. "I want you to be useful, Cliff. The catering company wanted to charge me $40 an hour for a server. I figured since you are living here rent-free, you could work off some of your debt." "I am not a waiter, Vanessa. I am a retired engineer. This is my house." "Not tonight it isn't," she snapped. "Tonight, this is my house. And you are help. Do not speak to the guests unless they order a drink. Do not tell anyone who you are. If anyone asks, you are just hired help. I do not want you embarrassing me with sob stories about your bad investments." She turned to leave, then paused. "And Cliff? Try to stand up straight. Slouching is unprofessional." I put on the uniform. The shirt was tight across the shoulders, cutting into my armpits. The vest was loose. I looked at myself in the cracked mirror above the utility sink. I looked ridiculous. I looked like a man who had lost everything, which, according to their narrative, was exactly what I was. I shaved with cold water and a dull razor, nicking my chin. The sting of the cut was grounding. It reminded me that I was still alive, still flesh and blood, even if they treated me like a ghost. I walked upstairs. The transformation of the house was startling. A 12-foot fir tree stood in the living room, decked in gold and silver ornaments. A fire crackled in the hearth, the same hearth I wasn't allowed to use. The air smelled of pine, expensive cologne, and hypocrisy. Brandon was standing by the punch bowl, adjusting his tie. He looked handsome. He looked successful. When he saw me, his face crumpled. He looked like he wanted to vomit. "Dad," he whispered, looking around to see if Vanessa was watching. "You don't have to do this. I can tell her you are sick." I picked up a silver tray of champagne flutes. The crystal was cold against my fingers. "I am paying my rent, Brandon," I said flatly. "Isn't that what you two wanted? Economic efficiency?" He couldn't meet my eyes. He grabbed a glass of whiskey and downed it in one gulp. He needed liquid courage just to exist in the same room as his own conscience. The guests began to arrive. A parade of furs, silk ties, and fake laughter filled the room. I moved through the crowd like a shadow. I offered drinks. I took empty glasses. I became exactly what Vanessa wanted, an invisible mechanism of service. "Champagne?" I asked a woman in a red dress. She didn't look at my face. She just took the glass. "Thank you," she said to the air above my head. I watched Vanessa work the room. She was radiant. She held court in the center of the living room, laughing at jokes that weren't funny, touching arms, guiding conversations toward real estate trends. She was a master of the performance. "This house has such good bones," I heard her say to a gray-haired man in a velvet blazer. "We have done so much work to modernize it. It really reflects our vision." Our vision. I gripped the tray so hard my knuckles turned white. I had designed the structural renovations of this house 10 years ago. I had laid the hardwood floors she was standing on. I circulated toward the back of the room, near the patio doors. My back was screaming. Standing on the concrete floor of the basement for weeks had taken its toll on my spine. I leaned against the wall for a second, just to catch my breath. "Hey, you." I looked up. A man was standing in front of me. He was young, maybe 30, with slicked back hair and a face that had never known a day of hardship. He was holding an empty plate. "Where are the crab cakes?" he asked, tapping the plate with a fork. "The tray over there is empty." "I will check the kitchen, sir," I said, pushing off the wall. "Well, hurry up, and get me another scotch. Neat, and make it a double. This punch is for children." I nodded and headed for the kitchen. Inside, the catering staff, actual professionals hired for the food, looked at me with pity. They knew. Service people always know when someone is being humiliated. A young woman handed me a fresh tray of appetizers. "You okay, Pops?" she asked quietly. "You look pale." "I am fine," I said. "Just doing my job." I walked back out. The young man, let's call him Todd, was waiting. He wasn't alone. He was talking to Vanessa and a few other guests. He was gesturing wildly, clearly telling a story about how much money he had made on a recent crypto swing. I approached with the tray. "Here are the crab cakes, sir," I said. Todd spun around, his elbow flying out. He hit the edge of the silver tray. It happened in slow motion. The tray tilted. 3 crab cakes, heavy with sauce, slid off the edge. They didn't hit the floor. They hit Todd's shoes, his pristine, polished Italian leather loafers. The room went silent. The music seemed to stop. The laughter died in everyone's throats. Todd looked down at his shoes. A glob of remoulade sauce was sliding down the leather, dripping onto the carpet. "Are you kidding me?" Todd shouted. His face turned a violent shade of red. "Look at this! Do you know how much these cost?" I stood there, the empty tray trembling in my hands. "I am sorry, sir," I said. "You bumped the tray." "Excuse me?" Todd stepped closer, invading my personal space. "I bumped the tray? You are clumsy, old man. You shouldn't be working a party if you have the shakes. God, look at this mess." Vanessa was there in an instant. She didn't look at the stain on the carpet. She looked at Todd's face. Todd was a client. Todd was money. "Oh my God, Todd, I am so sorry," Vanessa gushed, grabbing a napkin. She turned to me, her eyes burning with a hatred so pure it felt like a physical blow. "What is wrong with you?" she hissed. "Can you not do one simple thing without ruining it?" "It was an accident," I said, my voice steady. "I don't care," Vanessa shrieked. She pointed at the floor. "Clean it up. Now." I looked at the sauce on the shoe. I looked at the sauce on the carpet. I started to bend down to pick up the crab cake from the rug. "Not the rug!" Todd yelled. "My shoe! Get this grease off my shoe before it sets!" I froze. They wanted me to clean his shoe while he was wearing it. Vanessa looked at me. There was a challenge in her eyes, a dare. She wanted to see if I would break. She wanted to show everyone who was in charge. "You heard him, Cliff," she said, her voice icy. "Clean Mr. Halloway's shoe, or you can pack your bags and leave tonight. No motel, no nursing home, just the street." I looked at Brandon. He was standing behind Vanessa. He was pale. He took a step forward, his mouth opening. "Ness, that is too much," he mumbled. "Shut up, Brandon," Vanessa snapped without looking back. I looked at the room. 50 people were watching. Some looked uncomfortable, looking away. Others, like Todd, looked expectant. They were waiting for the show. They were waiting for the old servant to bow down. I slowly set the silver tray on a side table. My knees popped loudly as I lowered myself to the floor. The humiliation burned in my throat, hot and acidic. I took a linen napkin from my pocket. I reached out and wiped the sauce from Todd's shoe. "That is it," Todd sneered, not moving his foot. "Get in the crevices. I don't want a stain." I scrubbed the leather. I was on my knees in the house I had bought. I was cleaning the shoes of a man who wasn't fit to hold my father's wrench. "I am sorry, Mr. Halloway," I said softly. "Yeah, well, maybe you should retire, Pops," Todd laughed. He looked around for approval. The crowd chuckled nervously. The tension broke. The show was over. The servant knew his place. I stood up. My knees screamed in agony. I felt lightheaded. "Get out of here," Vanessa whispered to me. "Go to the kitchen. Stay there." I turned to walk away, but as I turned, my hand brushed against the pocket of my vest. I had been carrying something in there. A safety blanket. A reminder of who I really was. It was a business card. Not mine. But the card of the managing director of Osiris Ventures. The one Patty had given me to authorize the wire transfer. It fluttered out of my pocket and landed on the hardwood floor, right next to Vanessa's foot. I kept walking. I didn't look back. I heard Vanessa's voice behind me. "What is this?" I heard the rustle of paper. She had picked it up. "Osiris Ventures?" she muttered. "Why does he have this?" I pushed through the swinging doors into the kitchen. I leaned against the stainless steel counter, gasping for air. The catering staff looked at me with horror. The young woman who had spoken to me earlier came over. She had tears in her eyes. That was messed up," she whispered. "He is a pig. She is a witch." I looked at her and I straightened my vest. I wiped a smudge of sauce from my cuff. "It is okay," I said. My voice was calm. It was the calm of a man who has just decided that the sentence will be execution, not imprisonment. "Did you see her face?" the girl asked. "When you dropped that card?" She looked like she saw a ghost. I smiled. It was a small, tight smile. "She did see a ghost," I said. "She just doesn't know he is haunting her yet." I didn't go back out. I spent the rest of the night washing dishes in the back, listening to the muffled sounds of the party. I listened to Todd laughing. I listened to Vanessa bragging. But my mind was replay the scene. I wasn't replaying the humiliation. I was replaying the look on Vanessa's face when she saw the card. She would dismiss it tonight. She was too drunk on power and cheap champagne. She would tell herself I found it in the trash. She would tell herself I was just a senile old man collecting scraps of paper. But the seed was planted. Later that night, after the last guest had staggered out and the lights were dimmed, I went back to the basement. I didn't wait for permission. I walked past Brandon, who was slumped on the sofa, head in his hands. "Dad," he whispered. I didn't stop. I didn't acknowledge him. He had lost the right to call me Dad when he watched another man make me kneel. I went down to the cold. I took off the uniform and threw it in the corner. I put on my own clothes, my flannel shirt, my worn jeans. They felt like armor. I sat on the cot and pulled out the phone. I sent a text to Patty. "Increase the penalty clause. Make it 5 times the deposit. And add a clause about the furniture. I want everything, even the shoe rack." I hit send. I looked at my hands. They were still red from the cold water, but they were steady. I wasn't a waiter. I wasn't a servant. I was the owner of 3 farms, a beachfront estate, and as of tonight, I was the owner of a very specific, very burning vendetta. I lay down in the dark, but I didn't sleep. I waited for the sound of Vanessa's footsteps upstairs. I waited for the inevitable argument about the card. It didn't come. She was too confident, too arrogant. "Sleep well, Vanessa," I whispered to the ceiling beams. "Dream of your Porsche. Dream of your lake house. Because when you wake up, the nightmare begins. And this time, no one is going to clean up the mess for you." The morning after the party, the house smelled of stale champagne and regret. While Vanessa slept off her hangover and Brandon hid in the guest room nursing a migraine, I was on my hands and knees again. This time, I was scrubbing red wine stains out of the white rug in the hallway. The chemical fumes of the carpet cleaner made my eyes water, but I did not stop. I knew that if there was even a shadow of a stain left when Vanessa woke up, she would deduct the cost of a professional cleaning crew from the non-existent allowance she claimed to be keeping for me. As I scrubbed, my mind was racing. The business card I had dropped the night before, the one for Osiris Ventures, was a calculated risk. I knew Vanessa had picked it up. I knew she had seen it. Now I had to see if the bait had been taken, or if her arrogance was truly impenetrable. Around noon, Vanessa finally emerged. She was wearing sunglasses indoors and clutching a large iced coffee. She stepped over me without a word, as if I were a piece of furniture that had been toppled over. She went to the kitchen island and opened her laptop. I watched her from the hallway. I saw her reach into the pocket of her silk robe and pull out the card. She held it up to the light, frowning. Then she started typing. I stopped scrubbing. The rhythmic shh of the brush against the carpet fell silent. I held my breath. She was searching for the company. She was looking for the buyer of her house. Osiris Ventures, she muttered to herself. Global asset management. Private equity. She tapped her fingernails on the granite counter. She looked impressed. She looked greedy. Then she swiveled on her stool and looked directly at me. "Cliff!" she barked. I stood up, wiping my soapy hands on my jeans. "Yes, Vanessa?" She held up the card between two fingers, like it was a piece of evidence in a murder trial. "Where exactly did you get this? You dropped it last night. Do not lie to me." I walked slowly into the kitchen. I kept my face blank, my shoulders slumped. I had to play the part of the confused, senile old man perfectly. I found it," I stammered. "Found it where?" she pressed. "Did you steal it from a guest's coat? Did you go through pockets in the cloakroom? Because if you did, Cliff, I swear to God." "No," I said quickly, adding a tremble to my voice. "I found it on the floor, near the patio, after Mr. Halloway yelled at me. It must have fallen out of his pocket, or someone else's. I just picked it up because I thought it looked important. I was going to put it in the lost and found." Vanessa stared at me. Her eyes narrowed behind her dark glasses. She was calculating. She was weighing the probability of me knowing a high-powered investor against the probability of me being a clumsy janitor who picked up trash. She looked back at the card, then at me. A sneer curled her lip. "Of course," she said, tossing the card onto the counter. "You picked it up. For a second, I thought you were going to tell me you knew the managing director. As if a man like that would associate with someone who sleeps in a basement." She laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "It is funny, actually," she continued, turning back to her screen. "This company, Osiris Ventures, they are the ones buying the house. They are the ones paying all cash. It must have been fate that you found their card. A sign that the universe wants me to be rich." She did not see the irony. She did not see that the managing director she was so impressed by was actually my old college roommate's daughter, Patty. She did not see that the universe she was thanking was actually the father-in-law she was starving. I went back to scrubbing the rug, but I wasn't done yet. I needed to push harder. I needed to see how blind they really were. 2 days later, I was in the kitchen, ostensibly fixing the garbage disposal which Brandon had jammed with lime wedges. My head was under the sink, but my phone was in my hand. I had arranged for Patty to call me at exactly 2 p.m. Right on cue, the phone buzzed. I crawled out from under the sink, wiped my grease-stained hands on a rag, and answered it. Vanessa was at the table, reviewing the closing documents with a highlighter. "Hello?" I said, making sure my voice was just loud enough to carry. "Cliff, it is Patty," the voice on the other end said. "The funds are positioned. The wire transfer is set for the closing date. Are we still green on the penalty clause?" I looked at Vanessa. She hadn't looked up. She was engrossed in calculating her commission. "Yes," I said into the phone. The collection is ready. I am ready to let it go." Patty improvised perfectly. "Understood. And the Malibu transfer? The taxes are prepaid?" "Yes," I said. "The taxes are handled. It is a big burden off my shoulders." Vanessa's highlighter stopped moving. She didn't turn around, but her posture stiffened. She was listening. "Okay," Patty said. "I will call you when the transaction is complete. Goodbye, Mr. Dalton." "Goodbye," I said. I hung up. I went back to the sink. "Who was that?" Vanessa asked. Her voice was casual, too casual. I paused. I let the silence hang for a second. "Just an old friend," I said. "You were talking about taxes," she said, swiveling around, "and transfers. Do you have money you are hiding from us, Cliff? Because if you do, and you are living here for free, that is fraud." I stood up, holding the wrench. I looked her in the eye. "I was selling my stamp collection, Vanessa," I lied. "It is the last thing I have. I found a buyer online. He is wiring me $200 for the whole set. I just wanted to make sure the shipping taxes were covered." She stared at me. For a moment, doubt flickered in her eyes. Malibu. Why would a stamp collection involve Malibu? But then she looked at my greasy shirt. She looked at the wrench. She looked at the man she had beaten down. "Stamp collection," she scoffed. "Jesus, Cliff. You had me worried for a second. I thought you were actually doing something important. $200? That won't even cover the water bill you ran up this month." She turned back to her papers. "Make sure you fix that disposal properly," she muttered. "I don't want the inspector to find any faults. Not that there is an inspection. God, I love corporate buyers. They are so stupid with their money." I went back under the sink. I tightened the bolt. I smiled in the darkness of the cabinet. "Stupid," I whispered. "Yes, someone is definitely being stupid." The final test came the night before the closing. I decided to leave a physical trail. I knew Vanessa checked the recycling bin. She was paranoid about identity theft and checked every piece of paper before it went to the curb. I sat in the basement and drafted a document on my old laptop. It was a simple spreadsheet. It listed 3 properties: Napa Harvest Yield, Q4, Midwest Solar Lease, Year 5, and Malibu Estate, Maintenance Schedule. I printed it out on the dusty printer I had stashed in a box. I crumpled the paper up, smoothed it out, then tore it in half. I took the half that said Malibu Estate and Napa Harvest and walked upstairs. It was late. The house was dark. I walked to the kitchen and opened the recycling bin. I placed the torn paper right on top of a stack of glossy real estate magazines Vanessa had thrown away. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of screaming. It wasn't fear. It was laughter. Mocking, hysterical laughter. I went upstairs. Vanessa was standing in the kitchen, holding the torn piece of paper. Brandon was drinking coffee, looking confused. "Look at this!" Vanessa shrieked when she saw me. She waved the paper in my face. "Look what your father is doing now, Brandon." She handed the paper to Brandon. "Napa Harvest? Malibu Estate?" She read the words out loud, using a mocking, aristocratic accent. "Cliff, are you feeling okay? Do we need to up your dosage?" I stood there, blinking. I don't know what that is," I said. "Don't lie," she laughed. "I found it in the bin." "You printed this out. What is this? Is this your fantasy life? Do you sit down there in the dark and pretend you own vineyards? Pretend you have a house in Malibu?" She wiped a tear of laughter from her eye. "It is sad, really. It is pathological. You are so desperate to be someone, Cliff, that you are inventing spreadsheets for imaginary assets." Brandon looked at the paper. He looked disturbed. "Dad, is this true? Are you having episodes? Do you actually believe this is real?" I looked at my son. He wasn't worried about my health. He was worried that my insanity might embarrass them. "I was just dreaming," I said softly. "A man can dream, can't he?" Vanessa crumpled the paper up and threw it back in the trash. "Dream on your own time, Cliff, and stop wasting my printer paper. Ink is expensive." She grabbed her purse. "Come on, Brandon, we have to get to the title company. Gavin is waiting. Today is the day we get paid. Today is the day we get rid of the dead weight." She walked past me, brushing my shoulder. "Maybe with your $200 from the stamp collection, you can buy a map," she whispered. "So you can find your way to reality." They left. The door slammed. The house was quiet. I walked over to the trash can. I picked up the crumpled paper. I smoothed it out. "Reality," I said to the empty kitchen. "You have no idea how hard reality is about to hit you." I went to the window and watched their car pull out of the driveway. They were speeding. They were rushing toward the cliff edge, and I was the one who had cut the brakes. I went downstairs and put on my suit. My real suit. The one I had worn to my wife's funeral. The one I had worn to my father's funeral. And the one I would wear to the funeral of their greed. I checked my watch. The closing was at 10. I had an hour. I called Patty. "I am coming," I said. "See you there, partner," she replied. I walked out of the house. I didn't lock the door. It wouldn't be their house much longer anyway. The escape from my own house was a military operation. I waited until the digital clock on the microwave flashed 1 in the morning. The house was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. A clock my father had built, which Vanessa had threatened to paint white to match her farmhouse chic aesthetic. I slipped out of the basement, my shoes in my hand, stepping only on the edges of the staircase where the wood was less likely to groan. I was not sneaking out to meet a lover or to commit a crime. I was sneaking out to buy my own life back. I walked 3 miles in the biting Chicago wind to a 24-hour diner called the Greasy Spoon. It was the kind of place Vanessa would rather die than be seen in. The windows were yellowed with decades of nicotine and grease, and the neon sign out front buzzed with a dying electrical hum. It was perfect. It was the last place on earth anyone would look for a multimillionaire. I pushed open the door, the bell jingling cheerfully, a stark contrast to my mood. The diner was nearly empty. A truck driver hunched over a plate of eggs in the corner, and a waitress with tired eyes and a name tag that read Barb was wiping down the counter. And there, in the back booth, sitting underneath a flickering fluorescent light, was Patty Moore. She looked out of place yet completely in command. She was wearing a trench coat over her pajamas, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun. On the cracked laminate table in front of her sat a thick stack of legal documents and 2 cups of black coffee. I slid into the booth opposite her. The vinyl seat was torn, patched with duct tape that snagged on my trousers. "You look terrible, Cliff," Patty said, pushing one of the mugs toward me. Her voice was devoid of pity, just stating a fact. "I feel terrible," I admitted, wrapping my freezing hands around the warm ceramic. "I am living in a refrigerator, Patty. I am eating garbage. My back hurts so much I can barely stand up straight." "Then let's make this quick," she said, tapping the stack of papers. "This is it. The nuclear option." She flipped open the file. The first page bore the name we had chosen: Osiris Ventures, LLC. "I registered the company in Delaware this morning," Patty explained, her finger tracing the lines of text. "The registered agent is a shell firm. There is no trail leading back to you. As far as the world is concerned, Osiris Ventures is a faceless investment group with too much money and zero emotional attachment." "And the offer?" I asked. She flipped to the next page. The purchase agreement. Full asking price plus 20%. Cash. 7-day close. No inspection. I looked at the number. It was staggering. It was enough money to solve all their problems. It was enough money to make them feel invincible. "They will take it," I whispered. "They won't even hesitate." "That is the point," Patty said. "We are dangling a steak in front of starving wolves. They will swallow the hook before they even taste the meat." She turned the page again, revealing a dense block of text highlighted in yellow. "Now, this is the trap," she said, her voice dropping lower. "Section 4, Clause B, the Occupancy and Asset Preservation Clause." I leaned in, squinting at the fine print. "Read it, Cliff," I read. "The seller agrees to vacate the property within 48 hours of closing. Furthermore, the seller agrees that all fixtures, appliances, and treatments present during the initial viewing are part of the sale. Any damage, removal, or alteration of the property or its contents prior to the final transfer of possession will result in a breach of contract. In the event of a breach, the seller is liable for liquidated damages equal to 3 times the earnest money deposit, plus all legal fees." "And here is the kicker," Patty said, pointing to the next paragraph. "The buyer reserves the right to place a lien on any and all assets of the seller to satisfy this debt, effective immediately upon the determination of a breach." I looked up at her. "They are going to breach it," I said. "I know them. They are going to take the chandeliers. They are going to take the expensive curtains. Vanessa thinks the appliances are hers because she picked them out." "Exactly," Patty smiled, a cold, shark-like expression. "And the moment they unscrew a single light bulb, or the moment they stay 1 hour past the deadline because they are too busy spending the money to pack, we own them." "But the money," I said, hesitating. "I am wiring them $500,000, Patty. What if they run? What if they take the cash and disappear before we can sue them?" Patty shook her head. "They won't run, because of Section 5. The fund's disbursement hold." She showed me another page. "The money doesn't go to their personal account immediately. It goes into an escrow account controlled by the title company, which, by the way, is a subsidiary of my firm. The funds are released only after the final walkthrough confirms the property is vacant and intact. So they will think they have the money," I realized. "They will see the numbers on the screen." "But they cannot touch the principal," Patty finished. "However, and this is the beautiful part, the contract allows for a pre-release of 10% for moving expenses. That is $50,000. $50,000, I repeated. "Enough to buy a Porsche," Patty said, knowing exactly what I was thinking. "Enough to put a deposit on a new mansion. Enough to get them into serious debt before the main check clears." I sat back against the duct-taped booth. It was diabolical. It was perfect. It relied entirely on their greed and their inability to read the fine print. I picked up the pen. It felt heavy in my hand. "This is my son, Patty," I said softly. "I am setting a bear trap for my own son." Patty reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. Her skin was warm, a stark contrast to the cold that had settled in my bones over the last 2 weeks. "No, Cliff. You are not setting a trap. You are giving a test. If Brandon reads the contract, if he acts with integrity, if he treats the house with respect, he walks away with $500,000. He wins. All he has to do is be a decent human being." We both knew the answer to that. We both knew that decency had left the Dalton household a long time ago. "He will fail," I said. "Then he learns," she replied. "Sign the papers, Cliff." I looked at the signature line. Osiris Ventures, by authorized signatory. I pressed the pen to the paper. The ink flowed smoothly, black and permanent. I signed a name that wasn't mine. I signed as the ghost in the machine. "There," I said, pushing the stack back to her. "It is done." Patty organized the papers efficiently, sliding them back into her leather briefcase. "I will have the offer on their realtor's desk by 9 a.m., she said. "Get ready for the show." She stood up, buttoning her trench coat. She looked at me, her expression softening for a fraction of a second. "Are you sure you are okay down there? In the basement? I can get you a hotel, Cliff. We can say it is a distant relative helping you out." "No," I said, standing up. "I need to be there. I need to see it. I need to see their faces when they think they have won. It is the only thing keeping me warm." Patty nodded. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, foil-wrapped package. "Here, a bagel with cream cheese." I swiped it from the break room. "It is better than garbage." "Thank you," I said, taking the food. It felt like a bar of gold. I watched her walk out of the diner, a warrior in a trench coat. I waited 5 minutes, finishing my coffee. Then I stepped back out into the night. The wind had picked up. It howled through the streets of Chicago, cutting through my thin jacket. But as I walked the 3 miles back to my prison, I didn't feel the cold. I felt the heat of the burning fuse I had just lit. I slipped back into the house just as the sun was beginning to bruise the horizon purple. I crept down the stairs, silent as a shadow. I lay on my cot, listening to the house wake up. I heard Vanessa's alarm go off. I heard the shower run. I heard the coffee grinder. And then, about 3 hours later, I heard the scream. It wasn't a scream of terror. It was a scream of ecstasy. "Oh my God! Brandon, come here! Look at this email!" I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, a smile spreading across my face. They had bitten the apple. Now, all I had to do was wait for the poison to work. I got up and went to the utility sink. I splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. The man looking back wasn't the sad, broken retiree from the funeral. He was the CEO of Osiris Ventures, and he was about to conduct a very hostile takeover. I went upstairs to play my part. I shuffled into the kitchen, rubbing my eyes, looking confused. "What is all the noise?" I mumbled. Vanessa turned to me, her face flushed with victory. She looked at me like I was a bug she had already squashed. "We just sold the house, Cliff," she announced, waving her phone. "And we are going to be rich." I looked at the phone. I looked at the offer I had signed just hours ago in a booth that smelled of bacon grease. "Congratulations," I said. "I hope you read the contract carefully." Vanessa laughed. "I don't need to read it, Cliff. I just need to read the zeros." She turned her back on me. "Pack your trash, old man," she said over her shoulder. "You are moving out." I went back downstairs. I packed nothing. I knew I wasn't going anywhere. But they were. They were going straight to hell, and I was the one driving the bus. The executioner arrived at 9 o'clock sharp. His name was Gavin Ross, and he did not carry an axe. He carried a faux leather briefcase and wore a suit that was too shiny under the kitchen lights. He smelled of stale tobacco and cheap cologne, the scent of a man who chased ambulances and quick settlements. Vanessa greeted him like he was royalty. She offered him the good coffee, the kind she had denied me just days before. I was sitting at the kitchen table, my hands resting on my knees to stop them from trembling. This time, the trembling was not entirely an act. The adrenaline coursing through my veins was making my heart hammer against my ribs. I was about to commit fraud to catch a thief. It was a dangerous line to walk, but I had crossed the point of no return long ago. "Cliff, pay attention," Vanessa snapped, placing a thick stack of documents in front of me. "This is Mr. Ross. He is helping us with the paperwork for your transition." She did not say sale. She did not say eviction. She used corporate speak. Transition. As if I were a department being downsized, not a father being thrown into the street. Mr. Ross gave me a greasy smile. His teeth were yellow, and his eyes did not smile with them. "Good morning, Mr. Dalton. We just need a few signatures today. Standard procedure. Just to get your assets liquid so your son can manage your care better." Care. That was the word they were using. I looked at the document. The header was folded over. I could not see the words real estate purchase agreement. I could only see the signature line at the bottom. "What am I signing?" I asked, my voice weak and raspy. "I told you, Cliff," Vanessa said, her patience already wearing thin. "It is for your health insurance and the nursing home application. We need to show that you have financial backing, so they will give you a room with a window." She was lying so effortlessly. She was looking me in the eye and telling me that selling my home was the only way to get a view of the parking lot at Shady Pines. Brandon was standing by the refrigerator, looking at the floor. He knew. He knew this was a sale. He knew they were tricking me. And he said nothing. His silence was louder than her lies. I reached for the pen. I let my hand hover over the paper. I let it shake violently. I cannot read the fine print," I mumbled. "It is too blurry." "You do not need to read it, Dad." Brandon spoke up suddenly, his voice thick with guilt. Just sign it. It will be over soon." I looked at my son. "It will be over soon." He sounded like he was putting down a sick dog. Vanessa sighed loudly. She walked around the table and grabbed my hand. Her fingers were cold and sharp. She forced the pen into my grip. "Stop stalling, Cliff. Mr. Ross charges by the hour. Put the pen on the paper. Right there. Next to the X." I looked at the X. This was the moment. The deed to the house, the one filed in the county records, listed my full legal name, Clifford Theodore Dalton. It was a name I rarely used, but it was the only name that mattered in a court of law. If I signed anything else, the contract would be voidable. It would be a mess. It would be a legal nightmare that would tie up the title for months, freezing the assets and exposing them to the liability clause I had secretly inserted into the offer. I pressed the pen to the paper. I felt Vanessa's eyes boring into the top of my head. I felt Gavin's greedy anticipation. I started to write. I made the C large and shaky. I dragged the pen across the page, making the letters jagged and uneven. C-L-I-F. I stopped. I panted for air, acting as if the exertion was too much. "Keep going," Vanessa urged, tapping the table. "Finish it. F-T-O-N. Clifton." I did not write Clifford. I wrote Clifton. It was a nickname my mother had called me when I was 5 years old. It was not my legal name. It was not the name on the deed. And then, for the middle initial, instead of T for Theodore, I wrote a shaky J. Clifton J. Dalton. To the untrained eye, in the hurried scrawl of a senile old man, it looked close enough. But to a forensic accountant or a title officer doing a final audit, it was a glaring error. It was a signature that did not match the owner of the property. I finished the last name, letting the pen trail off into a meaningless squiggle. "There," I whispered, dropping the pen. "I am tired." Vanessa snatched the paper before the ink was even dry. She didn't look at the letters. She just looked to make sure the line was filled. She handed it to Gavin Ross. "Is that good?" she asked. Gavin glanced at it. He saw a signature. He saw his commission check. He didn't check the spelling. He didn't ask for my driver's license to verify. He was lazy. "Looks perfect," he said, sliding the document into his briefcase. "Congratulations, Mrs. Dalton. We will file this immediately. The buyer, Osiris Ventures, is ready to wire the funds as soon as we send the confirmation." Vanessa let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for years. She slumped against the counter, a smile spreading across her face that was pure, unfiltered avarice. Finally, she whispered, "It is done." She looked at me. The mask of concern dropped instantly. "You can go back downstairs now, Cliff. We have things to discuss." I stood up slowly. My legs felt strong, but I forced them to wobble. I walked to the basement door. I stopped and looked back at them. "Did I get the room with the window?" I asked. Vanessa laughed. It was a cruel, dismissive sound. "Sure, Cliff. You got the window. Now close the door." I went down into the dark. I sat on my cot and waited. I counted the minutes. I knew exactly what was happening upstairs. Gavin was scanning the document. He was emailing it to Patty's office. 10 minutes later, my hidden phone buzzed. It was a text from Patty. Received. "Clifton J. Dalton? You are a wicked man, Cliff. The title company will flag this in about 3 weeks during the final audit. By then, they will have already spent the deposit. We are green for the wire transfer." I smiled. I lay back on the thin pillow. I listened to the footsteps upstairs. They were heavy, frantic. They were celebrating. An hour later, the screaming started. But this time, it was the screaming of pure joy. I crept to the bottom of the stairs to listen. "It is here!" Vanessa was shouting. "Oh my God, Brandon, look at the account! $50,000, Brandon yelled. "The moving allowance just hit!" 50,000, the bait, the first piece of the cheese. "We are rich," Vanessa screamed. "We are actually rich. Call the dealership, Brandon. Tell them we are coming for the Porsche. And call the movers. I want everything out of here in 48 hours. I heard them running around. I heard the pop of a cork. Champagne at 11 in the morning. I went back to my cot. I pulled the wool blanket up to my chin. "Enjoy it," I whispered. "Enjoy the Porsche. Enjoy the champagne. Because you just signed a confession to fraud, and you didn't even read the name of the man you were stealing from." The next 2 days were a blur of chaotic activity. They were like locusts. They stripped the house. They didn't just pack their clothes. They packed the things that were legally part of the house. I watched from the shadows as Vanessa ordered the movers to take the curtains. The expensive, custom-made silk drapes that were listed in the fixtures and fittings clause of the contract. "Take them," she ordered the men. "They are Italian silk. I am not leaving them for some faceless corporation." She took the light fixtures. She actually had an electrician come in and remove the crystal chandelier from the dining room, replacing it with a $5 plastic bulb socket. That chandelier belonged to my grandmother, she lied to the electrician. It is a family heirloom. It wasn't. I had bought it at Home Depot 5 years ago. But I said nothing. I let her take it. Every item she removed was another nail in her coffin. Every screw she turned was a breach of contract. Clause 4B. Any removal of fixtures results in a penalty of 3 times the deposit. She was racking up debt by the minute. She took the smart thermostat. She took the bathroom mirrors. She even took the batteries out of the smoke detectors. It was petty. It was pathological. And then came the final insult. It was the morning of the move. The moving truck was idling in the driveway, belching gray smoke into the winter air. A brand new black Porsche Cayenne sat next to it, gleaming in the sun. Vanessa came down to the basement. She was wearing a fur coat. She looked like a movie star. She looked at me sitting on the cot in the cold. "All right, Cliff," she said. "This is it. We are leaving." She threw a piece of paper on the floor. "Here is the address of the motel. It is called the Bluebird Inn. It is on the highway. I paid for 2 nights. After that, the social worker will contact you about the state home." She didn't offer me a ride. She didn't offer to help me carry my 2 boxes. "You are leaving me here?" I asked. "How do I get there? Uber?" She shrugged. "Walk? You have legs, Cliff. Figure it out." She turned to leave, then stopped. She looked around the basement. "Make sure you sweep up before you leave. I don't want the new owners to think we were pigs." She walked up the stairs. I heard her heels clicking on the wood for the last time. I heard the front door slam. I heard the engine of the Porsche roar to life. I heard them drive away. I was alone. I sat in the silence for a long time. Then I stood up. I didn't sweep the floor. I walked upstairs. The house was a skeleton. Holes in the walls where pictures used to be. Wires dangling from the ceiling where lights used to be. It looked like a war zone. I walked to the kitchen. The refrigerator was gone. They had taken the refrigerator. I pulled out my phone. I dialed Patty. "They are gone," I said. "Did they take the fixtures?" she asked. "They took everything, Patty. They took the curtains. They took the chandelier. They took the fridge." Patty let out a low whistle. "That is a direct violation of Clause 4B. And since they have already spent the deposit on the car, they are in default," I finished. "Immediately," she said. "I am triggering the lien. I am freezing the main escrow account. And Cliff, yes, I am calling the police. Theft of fixtures over $5,000 is a felony." I looked around the empty shell of my home. "Do it," I said. I hung up. I walked to the window. I watched the snow falling on the driveway where the Porsche had just been. I put on my coat. I picked up my 2 boxes. I wasn't going to the Bluebird Inn. I was going to the finest hotel in Chicago. I had a celebration to attend. My own. I walked out the front door, leaving it unlocked. There was nothing left to steal. The thieves had already taken the bait, and the steel jaws of the trap were swinging shut. The silence in the kitchen was heavy, the kind of silence that precedes a thunderclap. Gavin Ross, the lawyer whose suit seemed to shrink every time he inhaled, placed his phone on the granite countertop. We were all staring at it. Vanessa was gripping the edge of the island so hard her manicured nails were turning white. Brandon was pacing near the refrigerator, chewing on his thumbnail. I sat in the corner on a wooden stool, pretending to be invisible. Pretending to be the senile old man who didn't understand that the digital numbers on a screen were about to change our lives forever. We were waiting for the confirmation, the wire transfer. According to the contract I had signed in the diner with Patty, Osiris Ventures was set to release the good faith deposit immediately upon the receipt of the signed purchase agreement. It wasn't the full amount. It was the $50,000 moving allowance, a sweetener Patty had designed specifically to trigger their greed. It was the cheese in the mousetrap. "It has been 10 minutes, Vanessa hissed, glaring at Gavin. "You said it was an instant transfer." "Why isn't it here?" "These things take time, Mrs. Dalton," Gavin said, wiping a bead of sweat from his upper lip. "Banking protocols, compliance checks. Osiris Ventures is a major entity. They probably have layers of authorization." Vanessa spun around, her eyes wild. "Layers? We signed the papers. We gave them the house. If they are backing out, I swear I will sue them for emotional distress." "I have already mentally spent that money, Gavin." I watched her. Mentally spent. That was the problem with Vanessa. She lived in a future that hadn't happened yet, financed by a past she hadn't earned. "Maybe they changed their minds," I said softly from my corner. "Maybe they realized the roof needs work." Vanessa whipped her head toward me. "Shut up, Cliff. The roof is fine. Don't you dare jinx this. If you say one more negative word, I will put you out on the porch until the movers come." She turned back to the phone. "Come on," she whispered. "Come on, you stupid machine." And then it happened. Ding. It was a simple, cheerful chime from Gavin's phone, a sound you might hear when a friend likes a photo on social media. But in that kitchen, it sounded like a cannon blast. Gavin picked up the phone. He tapped the screen. He adjusted his glasses. A slow, greasy smile spread across his face. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "The Eagle has landed. The initial disbursement of $50,000 has cleared the escrow account and has been forwarded to your joint checking account." Vanessa didn't scream. Not at first. She scrambled for her own phone. Her fingers flew across the screen, logging into her banking app. I saw her breath hitch. I saw her eyes widen until they were almost perfectly round. She dropped the phone on the counter. She looked at Brandon. "It is there," she whispered. "It is actually there." "How much?" Brandon asked, his voice cracking. 50000, she recited, emphasizing every zero. $50,000. Available balance. Then she screamed. It was a primal sound, a release of tension and hunger that had been building for years. She threw her arms around Brandon, nearly tackling him into the refrigerator. "We did it! We did it! We are rich, Brandon. This is just the beginning. The rest comes next week." Brandon laughed, a nervous, high-pitched giggle that turned into a roar. He hugged her back, lifting her off the ground. "We are out, Ness. We are finally out of this hole." I sat on my stool, watching them celebrate. I felt a cold knot in my stomach. They were hugging each other over money that was, legally speaking, a loan from the man they were planning to abandon. They were celebrating their own execution. Vanessa pulled away, her face flushed, her eyes bright with a feverish intensity. She turned to Gavin. "When does the rest hit?" "The big chunk?" 7 days, Gavin said, closing his briefcase. "As soon as the final walkthrough is confirmed and the keys are handed over. But this 50,000? This is yours. Consider it a signing bonus. Use it for the movers, for the hotel. For the car," Vanessa interrupted. She looked at Brandon. "The dealership closes at 6. If we leave now, we can get there in 20 minutes. Ness?" Brandon hesitated. "Maybe we should wait? We still have to pack. We have to organize the movers. 50,000 is a lot, but maybe we should save it for the down payment on the new place." Vanessa's face hardened. The joy evaporated, replaced by the steely determination that ruled their marriage. Brandon, look at me. We have been driving that second-hand sedan for 5 years. I am a top-tier realtor now. I just sold a house to an international conglomerate. I need to look the part. Image is everything. If I pull up to the closing in a Porsche, it sends a message. It says we are winners. But the packing. We can hire packers, Vanessa shouted, gesturing around the kitchen. We have money now. We don't have to pack boxes like peasants. We hire people to do that. We hire people to clean. We are moving up, Brandon. Stop thinking like a poor person. She grabbed her purse. She grabbed the keys to their old car. We are going. Now. Gavin, you can show yourself out? Of course, Gavin said, bowing slightly. I will be in touch regarding the final documents. Vanessa grabbed Brandon's hand and dragged him toward the door. She didn't look at me. She didn't acknowledge the man sitting in the corner, the man whose bank account had just funded her fantasy. Wait, I called out. Vanessa stopped in the doorway, her back to me. She turned her head slowly, impatience radiating from her silhouette. What, Cliff? We are in a hurry. That money, I said, keeping my voice steady. The contract said it was for moving expenses. Are you sure you can use it for a car? Vanessa laughed. It was a sound of pure pity. Oh, Cliff, you really don't understand how the world works, do you? Money is fungible. Once it is in my account, it is my money. I can buy a car, I can buy a boat, I can burn it in the driveway if I want to. It is called liquidity. Look it up. But if the deal falls through, I started. It won't fall through, she snapped. The money is in the bank. It is done. God, why are you always such a dark cloud? Just be happy for us. Or at least be quiet. She pulled Brandon out the door. Bye, Dad, Brandon called out, a weak apology in his voice. We will bring you back, dinner. The door slammed. I listened to their car start up. I listened to them peel out of the driveway, rushing toward the luxury car dealership on the highway. I was left alone in the kitchen with Gavin Ross. He looked at me. He looked at my worn flannel shirt, my gray hair, the way I slumped on the stool. He probably saw a tragic figure, a father left behind. Well, Mr. Dalton, Gavin said, checking his watch. It seems things are working out. I looked at him. I saw the greed in his eyes, too. He was calculating his own cut of the deal. Do you think they will buy the Porsche? I asked. Gavin chuckled. Knowing your daughter-in-law? They will buy the most expensive model on the lot. And why not? They just won the lottery. He picked up his briefcase. You should start packing your things, Mr. Dalton. The new owners, Osiris Ventures, they are very strict about deadlines. You don't want to be here when their security team arrives. I smiled. A slow, dry smile. Don't worry, Mr. Ross. I know exactly what the new owners want. He nodded, dismissing me, and walked out the front door. I waited until I heard his car leave. Then I stood up. The silence in the house was different now. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was hollow. I walked over to the refrigerator. I opened it. It was almost empty, but there was a bottle of sparkling water in the back. I took it out. I poured myself a glass. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. They were gone. They were racing down the highway, music blasting, feeling like kings of the world. They had $50,000 in their pocket. They felt invincible. But they didn't know the nature of the trap. Clause 4B was specific. Any use of the pre-disbursement funds for non-relocation-related expenses prior to the final closing constitutes a bad faith breach. Buying a luxury car wasn't a relocation expense. It was a lifestyle purchase. By the time they signed the papers for that Porsche, they would be in breach of contract. They would be spending money that wasn't theirs to spend. They were turning a deposit into a theft. I took a sip of the water. It was cold and sharp. I pulled out my burner phone from my pocket. I dialed Patty. "Did the alert go through?" I asked. "Yes," she replied. "The bank notification shows the transfer is complete." "They just left to buy a Porsche," I said. Patty was silent for a moment. Then she let out a low whistle. "They are not wasting any time, are they?" "No," I said. "They are efficient at digging their own graves." "Document it," Patty said. "Get the receipt if you can, or just wait for them to drive it home. The VIN number will be enough to prove the asset was purchased with our funds." "I will be watching," I promised. I hung up. I went back downstairs to the basement. It was still cold, but the cold didn't bother me as much. I sat on my cot and closed my eyes. I imagined the showroom. I imagined the smell of new leather. I imagined the salesman handing Vanessa the keys. I imagined her signing the check. "Sign it, Vanessa," I whispered in the dark. "Sign your name. Make it legible. Because that signature is going to cost you a lot more than $50,000. I lay there for hours, waiting for the sound of a new engine, waiting for the return of the prodigal son and his queen. They thought they were bringing home a trophy, but they were bringing home a Trojan horse, built of German engineering and financed by their own destruction. Around 7 o'clock, headlights swept across the basement window. Twin beams of high-intensity LED light. I heard the purr of a powerful engine. It didn't sound like their old sedan. It sounded like a beast. I heard car doors slam. I heard Vanessa's voice, shrill and excited. "Look at it, Brandon! Look how it shines!" I got up. I climbed the stairs. I opened the door just a crack. They were in the kitchen again. They were laden with bags. Takeout food, but expensive takeout. Sushi, steaks, and on the counter, Vanessa threw a set of keys. The fob was heavy, black, and bore a golden crest. She saw me peeking out. "Come on out, Cliff," she shouted. "Come see what success looks like." I stepped into the kitchen. "You bought it?" I asked. "Bought it?" she laughed. "We conquered it. A Cayenne turbo, black on black, heated seats, panoramic roof. It is a spaceship, Cliff." She grabbed a piece of sushi and popped it into her mouth. "And this," she gestured with her chopsticks. "This is our last meal in this dump. Tomorrow the packers come. Tonight, we feast." She pushed a plastic container toward me. "Here, California rolls. We figured you might be hungry. Don't say we never gave you anything." I looked at the sushi. I looked at the keys. "Thank you," I said. I took the food. I retreated to the basement. I didn't eat the sushi. I sat on my cot and took out my notebook. I wrote down the date. I wrote down the time. I wrote down Item 1, Porsche Cayenne, purchased with restricted funds. The list was just beginning, and the bill was coming due. The black Porsche Cayenne was not just a car. In the moonlight, it looked like a weapon. It sat in the driveway, its polished surface reflecting the distorted image of the house they had just sold out from under me. I stood at the small, grime-streaked window of the basement, watching them admire it. Vanessa was running her hand over the hood as if it were the skin of a lover. Brandon was kicking the tires, looking terrified and exhilarated all at once. They had spent nearly the entire moving allowance in a single afternoon. $50,000. Gone. Burned on a status symbol that would depreciate the moment they drove it off the lot. I watched them unload the trunk. It wasn't just the car. They were laden with bags. Bright orange Hermes bags, black and white Chanel boxes. They hadn't just bought a vehicle. They had gone on a rampage. They were trying to buy a new identity, one purchase at a time. I took out my notebook and wrote it down. Luxury apparel, designer handbags, estimated value, $15,000. They were spending money they didn't have, on credit cards they planned to pay off with the next wire transfer, the transfer that was never coming. I heard the front door open, followed by the thud of heavy footsteps and manic laughter. I climbed the stairs slowly. I wanted to see the madness up close. I wanted to smell the desperation masked as success. When I entered the kitchen, it looked like a looting had taken place, but in reverse. The countertops were covered in silk, leather, and gold. Vanessa was holding up a pair of shoes with red soles, spinning in a circle. "Look at these, Cliff!" she shrieked when she saw me. "Do you know what these are? These are Christian Louboutins. They cost more than your first car." "They are very red," I said neutrally. She laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "They are the color of power, Cliff. Something you wouldn't understand." Brandon was struggling to open a bottle of scotch. Blue label, $300 a bottle. His hands were shaking. "We also put the deposit on the Lake Geneva villa," he blurted out, looking at me with wide, drug-addicted eyes. The agent accepted the digital transfer. "We move in 3 days." I looked at him. "You put a deposit on a $2 million house?" I asked. "Using what funds?" "Using the equity, Dad," Brandon shouted, pouring the amber liquid into a crystal glass. "The equity from this house. It is practically ours already. We just bridged the gap with the credit cards. Once the Osiris money hits next week, we pay it all off. We are leveraging, Dad. It is high finance." It wasn't high finance. It was fraud. They had secured a contract on a new property based on the proceeds of a sale they had already violated. The legal web they were spinning was so complex and so tight that they would never extricate themselves. Vanessa kicked off her old shoes and slipped into the red-soled heels. She towered over me. "We are upgrading everything," she announced. "New car, new house, new wardrobe. And that brings me to a very important point." She stopped smiling. She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my frayed flannel shirt and my worn-out slippers. "We cannot take trash into the new palace," she said. "It ruins the energy." "What do you mean?" I asked. "I mean you, Cliff, and your junk." She walked over to the hallway closet. This was the closet where I kept my winter coat, my few remaining shirts, and the box of photos of my late wife. It was the only storage space I had been allowed to keep upstairs. She threw the door open. "Look at this," she sneered, pulling out my heavy wool coat. "It smells like mothballs and failure." She threw it on the floor. "And these boots?" "Muddy, disgusting." She tossed my work boots onto the pile. "Vanessa, stop," I said, stepping forward. "Those are my things. It is 20 degrees outside." "I don't care," she screamed, grabbing armfuls of my clothes. "I am purging, Cliff. I am cleansing my life. I don't want to see one single rag that belongs to you in my new world." She grabbed the box of photos. My heart stopped. "Put that down," I said, my voice dropping to a low growl. She paused, holding the box over the pile of clothes. She looked at the label. "Sarah, 1985 to 1999. "Oh, memories," she mocked. "Dead memories." She dropped the box. It hit the floor with a sickening crunch. The glass of the frames inside shattered. "Brandon," I yelled. "Do something! She is destroying my property!" Brandon stood by the island, clutching his scotch. He looked at Vanessa, then at me. He took a sip of his drink and looked away. "She is right, Dad," he mumbled. "We need a fresh start." I stood frozen. The betrayal was complete. He wasn't just letting her hurt me. He was agreeing with the erasure of his own mother's memory. Vanessa wasn't done. She kicked the pile of clothes toward the front door. "Open the door, Brandon," she ordered. He hesitated for a second, then walked over and opened the heavy oak door. The freezing wind swirled into the hallway, carrying snowflakes. Vanessa grabbed my coat, my shirts, my boots. She walked to the threshold and hurled them out into the snow. She kicked the box of photos after them. The pictures spilled out onto the icy concrete of the porch, faces smiling from the past, now covered in frost. "There," she said, dusting off her hands. "Now the house feels lighter." She turned to me. "You have until the movers come tomorrow morning to get your personal hygiene items out of the basement. Anything left behind goes to the dump." "And Cliff?" She stepped closer, invading my space, smelling of expensive leather and cruelty. "You are not coming with us to the hotel. I canceled your reservation at the motel too. I decided I need that money for a spa treatment. You can sleep in your truck, or you can go to a shelter. I really don't care. Just be gone by 8 a.m. She slammed the door shut, locking my history outside in the cold. I looked at the closed door. I looked at Brandon. "You are kicking me out? Tonight?" "No," Vanessa corrected. "We are letting you stay in the basement one last night. Because we are generous. But don't touch anything in the kitchen, and don't make a sound. We have to celebrate." She grabbed the bottle of scotch and the crystal glasses. "Come on, baby," she said to Brandon. "Let's go christen the new car." They walked out to the garage, leaving me standing in the hallway. I waited until the door to the garage clicked shut. Then I moved. I unlocked the front door and stepped out into the biting wind. I fell to my knees on the porch. My hands were numb as I gathered the photos. I brushed the snow off Sarah's face. I picked up the shattered glass. I gathered my coat, which was already damp. I carried it all back inside, not to the closet, but to the basement. I sat on my cot, shivering, surrounded by the wreckage of my life. My coat was wet. My boots were cold. The glass in the frames was broken. But as I looked at the pile of wet clothes, I didn't feel sadness. I felt a cold, hard clarity. They had bought a Porsche with stolen money. They had put a deposit on a mansion with non-existent funds. And now, they had destroyed my personal property. Clause 12. Destruction of personal property. The penalty was immediate eviction and forfeiture of all assets on the premises to cover damages. I pulled out my phone. I took a picture of the wet clothes. I took a picture of the broken frames. I took a picture of the empty hanger in the closet. Then I texted Patty. They destroyed my personal effects. They threw Sarah's photos in the snow. And they just admitted to putting a deposit on a new house using credit. The reply came instantly. "That is it. The gloves are off. I am filing the emergency injunction. We are not waiting for the closing. We are taking possession tomorrow." Tomorrow. I looked at the ceiling. I could hear the garage door opening. I could hear the engine of the Porsche revving. They were sitting in their new car, in the garage, drinking scotch, celebrating their victory. "Celebrate," I whispered. "Drink up, because tomorrow morning you are going to wake up with the worst hangover of your lives." I packed my 2 boxes. I packed the broken photos. I packed the wet coat. I was ready. I lay down on the cot, but I didn't sleep. I visualized the clock ticking. Every second that passed was a second closer to justice. They had given me an ultimatum. Be gone by 8 a.m. I would be gone. But I wouldn't be leaving alone. I would be leaving with the keys to my house. And they would be leaving with nothing but the clothes on their backs and a debt that would follow them to the grave. The night dragged on, the cold seeping into my marrow. But inside I was burning. I was burning with the righteousness of a father who had given everything, and the fury of a man who had been pushed too far. The spending spree was over. The bill was on the table. And at 8 a.m. sharp, I was going to make them pay. The restaurant, Le Blanc, was a temple of excess. It was the kind of place where the menu had no prices, and the waiters spoke in hushed, reverent tones about the origin of the truffles. Vanessa had chosen it not for the food, but for the lighting. She wanted to look good while she delivered the final blow. She and Brandon were already seated when I arrived, their table positioned near the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the valet stand. They looked like royalty. Vanessa was wearing a sequined dress that caught the candlelight, and Brandon was in a new suit that still had the creases from the packaging. I was wearing my old funeral suit, the one that smelled faintly of cedar and mothballs. When the maitre d' led me to the table, Vanessa didn't stand up. She barely looked up from her wineglass. "You are late, Cliff," she said, checking her diamond-encrusted watch. "Another purchase from the credit card spree. We almost ordered without you." I sat down. The chair was velvet, soft and expensive. "I had to take the bus," I said quietly. "It takes a while." Vanessa smirked, taking a sip of her champagne. "Well, get used to it. The bus is going to be your primary mode of transport from now on. Unless the shelter has a shuttle." She pushed a menu toward me. "Order whatever you want, within reason. We are celebrating, but let's not go crazy. I don't want you getting indigestion before your big move tomorrow." I looked at the menu. Foie gras, caviar, Wagyu beef. It was obscene. "I will just have the soup," I said. "Suit yourself," she shrugged. "Brandon is having the lobster. We are going all out. After all, we have a reputation to maintain now." I looked at my son. He was drinking heavily again. His eyes were glassy. He avoided my gaze, focusing intensely on breaking a breadstick into tiny, jagged pieces. "So, Brandon," I said, "how is the new car?" He flinched. It is great, Dad. Really fast." "It is magnificent," Vanessa corrected him. The valet was practically drooling when we pulled up. That is the power of success, Cliff. People respect you when you have the right accessories." She leaned across the table, her eyes glittering with malice. "You know, Cliff," I was thinking, "since you are going to be living on state aid, maybe you should sell that old truck of yours. It is an eyesore. I bet you could get $500 for it. That would buy you a lot of... What do you eat? Canned beans?" I folded my hands on the pristine white tablecloth. "I am not selling the truck, Vanessa, and I am not going to the shelter." She laughed, a loud, performative sound that made heads turn at nearby tables. "Oh, Cliff, denial is a river in Egypt, not a retirement plan. You have no money, you have no home, you have nothing. Tonight is charity, tomorrow is reality." She reached into her purse and pulled out a glossy brochure. She slapped it onto the table next to the breadbasket. "Shady Pines State Facility." "I pulled some strings," she whispered. "I got you bumped up the waiting list. It is a shared room, 4 beds to a room. But hey, it is warm. You should be thanking me." I looked at the brochure. I looked at the woman who had terrorized my final years. I looked at the son who had let it happen. I pushed the brochure back. "I won't be needing this," I said. Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Stop being difficult. You are signing the admission papers tonight. I am not driving you there tomorrow if you are going to make a scene." "I am not making a scene, Vanessa," I said, my voice hardening. "I am making a statement." I reached into my jacket pocket. I didn't pull out a pen. I pulled out an iPad. It was brand new, the screen pristine. Vanessa frowned. "Where did you get that? Did you steal it?" I ignored her. I placed the tablet in the center of the table, propping it up against the wine cooler. "I have something to show you," I said. A little farewell presentation. Vanessa scoffed. I don't have time for your senile home movies, Cliff. Watch, I commanded. The tone of my voice stopped her. It wasn't the voice of a victim. It was the voice of the man who had built skyscrapers. I tapped the screen. The video feed went live. It wasn't a recording. It was a live stream. The screen split into 3 boxes. The first box showed a sprawling vineyard bathed in the golden light of the California afternoon. Rows upon rows of grapes stretched to the horizon. A sign in the foreground read, Dalton Estate Winery, established 1955. Vanessa blinked. What is this? She asked. The second box showed a massive solar array in the Midwest, thousands of panels glinting in the sun. A ticker at the bottom showed the energy output and the revenue generated. Current daily yield, $4,200. And the third box showed the front door of the house we had just left. But it wasn't empty. A team of people in suits were standing there. And in the center, holding a clipboard, was Patty Moore. Vanessa went pale. She recognized the house. She recognized the lawyer. That is our house, she stammered. Who are those people? Why is there a camera there? I looked her in the eye. That is not your house, Vanessa. It never was. I tapped the screen again. The audio from the third feed turned on. Patty's voice came through, crisp and clear, cutting through the ambient noise of the restaurant. Mr. Dalton, we have completed the initial assessment of the property. The locks have been changed. The security team is in place. Vanessa grabbed the iPad, her hands shaking. Mr. Dalton? She whispered. Why is she calling you Mr. Dalton? Because I am the owner of Osiris Ventures, I said calmly. The silence that fell over the table was absolute. Brandon dropped his breadstick. Vanessa's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Osiris, she choked out. No, that is impossible. Osiris is a global fund. You are broke. You wash your clothes in a sink. I am the sole proprietor of Osiris Ventures LLC, I repeated. I bought the house, Vanessa. I bought it from you. Or rather, I tricked you into selling it back to me. But the money, Brandon stammered. The $50,000? The transfer? My money, I said. I transferred it from my left pocket to my right pocket, passing it through your hands just long enough for you to incriminate yourselves. Incriminate? Vanessa's voice rose to a screech. What are you talking about? We sold the house. It is a legal deal. I nodded to the screen. Patty? On the screen, Patty looked directly into the camera. She held up a document. Mrs. Dalton, Mr. Dalton, as of 6 p.m. this evening, you are in violation of multiple clauses of the purchase agreement. Specifically, Clause 4B, misappropriation of restricted funds. Vanessa shook her head frantically. No, that was a moving allowance. We can spend it however we want. Incorrect, Patty continued, her voice like a judge delivering a sentence. The contract states the funds are for relocation expenses only. Our forensic team has flagged a purchase of $72,000 at a luxury car dealership made at 5:45 p.m. today. That is a breach. So what? Vanessa yelled at the screen, ignoring the diners staring at us. We will pay it back. We have the rest of the money coming. There is no rest of the money, Patty said. The main escrow has been frozen. Furthermore, we have documented the removal of fixtures listed in the asset schedule. The chandelier, the drapes, the smart home system. That is theft, Mrs. Dalton. Grand larceny. Vanessa dropped the iPad. It clattered onto the table. You set us up, she hissed at me. You old bastard. You trapped us. I didn't set you up, I said, taking a sip of water. I gave you a test. I gave you $50,000 and a simple set of rules. You failed. You couldn't resist the greed. You couldn't resist the urge to show off. I stood up. I buttoned my old jacket. And then there is the personal property, I added. Clause 12, you threw my wife's photos in the snow. You destroyed my clothes. That triggers the immediate forfeiture clause. Forfeiture of what? Vanessa screamed. We have nothing left there. We took it all. Forfeiture of all assets, I said, including the ones you bought with my stolen money. I pointed out the window. Look. Vanessa and Brandon turned their heads. Outside, under the streetlights, a large flatbed tow truck had pulled up to the valet stand. The driver was already hooking chains to the axle of the shiny black Porsche Cayenne. No! Brandon yelled, jumping up. No, that is my car! He ran toward the window, banging on the glass. It is not your car, son, I said, my voice sad but firm. It is the bank's car. And since I hold the lien on your debt, it is effectively my car. Vanessa sat frozen in her chair. She watched as the tow truck lifted the front of her dream machine into the air. She watched as the valet stepped back, handing the keys to the driver. She watched her status symbol, her ticket to the high life, being dragged away like a piece of scrap metal. She turned to me. Her face was a mask of pure terror. Cliff, Dad, please, we can fix this. We can undo the sale. We will give you the money back. Just don't do this. We have the new house deposit. If we lose this money, we lose that house too. You already lost it, I said. You have no income. You have no assets. You have a mountain of debt and a lawsuit for fraud coming your way. I leaned in close. I tried to be your father, Vanessa. I tried to be a grandfather to your children, if you ever had them. I cooked your meals, I fixed your roof, and you treated me like a dog. You put me in a freezing basement. You denied me medicine. You laughed when I cleaned shoes on my knees. I paused, letting the weight of the memories crush her. You wanted a transition? You got one. You are transitioning from the middle class to the bottom. I picked up the iPad. On the screen, Patty nodded to me. The police are on their way to the hotel to recover the stolen fixtures, Cliff. Do you want to press charges for the theft? I looked at Brandon. He was sobbing against the glass. No, I said. I don't want them in jail. I want them to work. I want them to know what it feels like to start from zero. I turned to Vanessa. The check for the dinner, I said. It is on you. Oh, wait. Your cards are probably frozen by now. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a $20 bill. I threw it on the table. Here. This should cover the soup. You will have to wash dishes for the lobster. I turned and walked away. I walked through the silent restaurant. I didn't look back at the sobbing woman in the sequins or the broken man at the window. I walked out the front door, past the empty spot where the Porsche had been. The night air was cold, but for the first time in months, I didn't feel it. I hailed a taxi. Where to? The driver asked. The airport, I said. I have a vineyard to visit. As the taxi pulled away, I looked at my phone. I deleted the contact named Home. I didn't have a home there anymore. My home was wherever I chose to be, and for the first time in a long time, the road ahead was wide open. I watched them through the rear window of the taxi as it pulled away from the curb. It was a tableau of absolute misery. The tow truck had vanished around the corner with their black Porsche, taking their last shred of dignity with it. Vanessa was no longer the queen of high society. She was just a woman in a wet, sequined dress standing on a dirty sidewalk, screaming at her husband. I could see her hands flying wildly, pointing at the empty parking spot, then poking Brandon in the chest. Even through the glass, I knew exactly what she was saying. She was blaming him. She was telling him he should have read the contract. She was telling him he should have stood up to me. And Brandon, for the first time in his life, was not taking it silently. I saw him shout back. I saw him throw his hands up in a gesture of total defeat. They were devouring each other. The greed that had bound them together was now the very thing tearing them apart. They were two drowning people trying to climb on top of one another to survive, only to push each other deeper into the abyss. The freezing rain began to fall, mixing with the tears I knew were streaming down their faces, washing away the facade they had spent so much money to build. They were alone in the city, with no home to go to, no car to drive, and a silence between them that would last forever. I turned around and settled into the worn leather seat of the cab. The driver asked me which terminal, and I told him International. I wasn't just going to Napa. I was going to see the world. For years, I had convinced myself that family was an obligation, a cross to bear, no matter how heavy it became. I thought love meant enduring abuse in silence. But as the city lights blurred past me, I realized that true family is not defined by DNA. It is defined by respect. It is defined by kindness. It is defined by the people who bring you soup when you are sick, not the ones who pour it on the floor. I had lost a son, yes, but I had regained myself. I touched the pocket of my jacket where my passport lay next to the deed to the vineyard. I was 68 years old, and my life was not ending. It was just beginning. I would build that school. I would grow those grapes. I would leave my legacy to people who actually understood the value of hard work. I closed my eyes and listened to the hum of the tires on the asphalt. It was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of freedom. I didn't hate Brandon and Vanessa. I just didn't care anymore. They were ghosts in my rearview mirror, fading smaller and smaller until they were gone completely. I took a deep breath, filled my lungs with the cool night air, and smiled. The cage was open, and the bird had flown. I learned that the heaviest burdens we carry are often the expectations of people who do not love us. For years, I thought being a good father meant enduring disrespect in silence, believing that sacrifice would eventually yield gratitude. But I was wrong. True family is not defined by whose DNA you share, but by who stands beside you when you have nothing to offer but yourself. Money can buy a luxury car or a mansion, but it cannot buy character, and it certainly cannot buy peace. If you are holding on to a relationship that hurts you just because you are afraid of being alone, let go. The solitude of freedom is far warmer than the cold company of those who only value your utility. It is never too late to rewrite your ending. And sometimes, the best legacy you can leave is the example of standing up for your own dignity. If you believe that respect is worth more than any inheritance, hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of truth seekers.